The nightmare always starts the same way. February 1991. The Iraqi desert. Sand stretches in every direction like an ocean made of dust and death. Samuel Dockery is 23 years old and he can smell death on the wind. Burning oil, cordite, the sickly sweet rot of bodies left too long in the desert heat. His hands are steady on the M40 rifle. They won't shake for another 50 years. Private First Class Bobby Cross lies 3 feet away in a blown-out bunker, gut shot, dying slow. The kind of slow that lets a man know every second he's got left. Bobby's maybe 19, fresh-faced farm kid from Iowa, and his intestines are trying to crawl out of the hole in his stomach. He keeps asking Samuel to tell him it doesn't hurt that bad. Samuel keeps lying. Around them, 7 other bodies. Martinez, Johnson, the Kowalski brothers, Washington, Cheng, Reynolds, every one of them somebody's son, every one of them dead in the first 5 minutes of an ambush that intelligence swore wouldn't happen. Intelligence was wrong. Intelligence is always wrong. The Iraqi Republican Guard soldiers circle like wolves, patient, knowing the Americans in the bunker have maybe 6 hours of ammunition left, and then it's bayonets and screaming. Samuel counts muzzle flashes in the sand berms. 40, maybe 50. He's killed 11 so far. His rifle barrel is hot enough to raise blisters. Bobby grabs his wrist. The kid's hand is cold despite the 120-degree heat. "Tell my boy I died for something that mattered," Bobby whispers. "Promise me, Shepard." Samuel promises. He's good at promises, not so good at keeping them. Bobby dies at sunset. Samuel holds him the whole way down, then he goes back to killing. 36 hours later, the relief column finds him. 108 empty shell casings scattered around the bunker. 43 confirmed enemy kills, 7 dead Americans, and 1 live one who wishes he wasn't. They pin a medal on his chest and tell him he's a hero. He knows better. Samuel Dockery jerked awake in the darkness of his cabin, drenched in sweat that had nothing to do with the temperature. His heart hammered against ribs that felt too brittle, too old. Arthritis sang through his kin knuckles like broken glass. 4:47 in the morning. Same time, every time. 55 years, and his body still knew exactly when Bobby Cross had died. He sat up slow, feeling every one of his 72 years in the protest of joints that had carried him through 3 wars, 2 marriages, and more miles of mountain wilderness than any man had a right to survive. His hands trembled as he reached for the lamp. Not fear, just age. Just the slow betrayal of a body that used to be a weapon and now was just worn-out machinery. The cabin was cold. January in the West Virginia mountains meant cold that got into your bones and stayed there. He'd grown up with this cold. It felt like home. It felt like dying. Samuel shuffled to the bathroom, caught his reflection in the mirror over the sink. An old man looked back. Gray hair cropped military short out of habit. Face like weathered leather mapped with scars and sun damage, and 55 years of nightmares. Eyes that had seen too much and couldn't forget any of it. He splashed water on his face. His hands shook worse when he was tired. The coffee pot took 3 tries to fill. Arthritis made his fingers stupid, clumsy. He'd held a rifle steady at 1,000 meters once. Now he couldn't grip a coffee mug without concentration. While the coffee brewed, he stood at the window and watched the sun not quite rise over the Monongahela National Forest. His land, 40 acres of pine and rock and solitude. He'd bought it in 1993 with his retirement pay, built the cabin with his own hands, raised a son here, buried a wife. The son was dead too now. Iraq, 2004, Marine sniper just like his old man. Daniel had been good, maybe better than Samuel had been. Didn't matter. Dead was dead. The photo wall documented the casualties. Martha, his wife, smiling in a summer dress 6 months before the cancer took her. Daniel in his dress blues, 19 years old and bulletproof. Little Maya, his granddaughter, gap-toothed and fearless at 7, holding the rifle Samuel had taught her to shoot with. Maya was 28 now, Army sniper, deployed somewhere she couldn't tell him about, doing things she couldn't talk about. They hadn't spoken in 3 months. His fault. He'd pushed her away after Daniel died. Couldn't stand the thought of losing her, too. Easier to cut the ties before they could strangle you. Easier, not better. The radio on the kitchen counter muttered morning news. Samuel ignored it out of habit. Politics, sports, weather, none of it mattered up here. He poured coffee with shaking hands, added sugar because Martha had always said coffee should be sweet, and stood at the window watching light creep across the valley. The news anchor's voice changed pitch. Samuel's combat instincts, buried but never dead, picked up on it immediately. Breaking news this morning. 32 federal agents are missing along the Montana-Canadian border. The multi-agency task force, including Border Patrol and FBI personnel, disappeared 6 days ago during what sources describe as a routine investigation into weapons smuggling. Pentagon officials declined to comment, but sources close to the situation suggest the agents may have been ambushed by heavily armed hostiles. Weather conditions and terrain are hampering search and rescue efforts. Families are demanding answers. Samuel turned the volume down. Not his problem. He'd done his time, paid his dues, bled enough for 3 lifetimes. The government had other people to send, younger people, people whose hands didn't shake. The phone rang. Samuel stared at it like it was a snake. The phone never rang. He'd made sure of that. No friends left. No family that wanted to talk. Just him and the ghosts and the long, slow slide into whatever came after. It rang again. He picked it up on the 4th ring, already knowing this was going to be bad. "Shepard," a voice said. Old, tired, familiar. "It's Hank." Colonel Hank Reeves, Samuel's commanding officer from Desert Storm. The man who'd pulled strings to get Samuel his sniper training. The man who'd stood beside him at Daniel's funeral and hadn't said a word because no words would help. They hadn't spoken in 2 years. "I'm done, Hank," Samuel said. His voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. "Been done since '91. "I know," Hank said. "Wouldn't call if it wasn't important." "The news," Samuel said. "Montana? That your people?" "Some of them. Pentagon will handle it." "Pentagon's writing them off," Hank said. "Political year, election coming. Nobody wants another Benghazi. Nobody wants the optics of a rescue mission that might go bad." Samuel closed his eyes. "So they die." "So they die," Hank confirmed. "Unless someone who doesn't give a damn about optics goes and gets them. Send Delta. Send the SEALs. Hell, send the Boy Scouts. I'm 72 years old and I can barely hold a coffee cup." "I know how old you are, Shepard. I'm 68 and I've got cancer eating my lungs. We're all falling apart. But those kids don't have time for me to find someone young and pretty. Not my fight." Silence on the line. Long enough that Samuel thought maybe Hank had hung up. Then, one of the 32 is Maya. Samuel's hand tightened on the phone. His pulse, which had been steady, kicked into combat rhythm. Adrenaline dumped into his bloodstream like it was 1991 and the world was made of bullets. "Say that again." "Maya deployed to Montana 2 weeks ago. Joint task force investigating weapons smuggling across the Canadian border. She didn't tell you because you two aren't talking and she didn't want to worry you. They got ambushed 6 days ago. 200 plus hostiles, military-grade weapons, professional operation. Whole team pinned down, communications cut, presumed captured or killed." Presumed. Satellite imagery shows heat signatures in an old Cold War bunker complex. Could be hostages, could be bodies. Pentagon doesn't want to risk assets finding out which. Samuel's mind was already moving, calculating, planning. Old instincts waking up like hibernating bears. Where? Glacier National Park region. Montana-Canadian border. Malmstrom Bunker Complex. Decommissioned in '95. Middle of nowhere. 40 miles from nearest road. Winter conditions. Whole areas locked down with snow. Hostiles. Best intel says private military contractors. Black Ridge Solutions. Run by a man named Rick Cross. Samuel felt the name hit him like a fist. Cross. "Yeah," Hank said quietly. "Bobby Cross's son. Rick's been running Black Ridge for 10 years. Weapons deals, security contracts, all above board until about 3 years ago. FBI's been investigating. Looks like Rick found out. This is him cleaning house." "Bobby's boy," Samuel whispered. "Bobby's boy," Hank confirmed. "Who grew up thinking you got his daddy killed. Army told his mother you abandoned the position during Desert Storm, left Bobby to die. You know how the story got twisted." Samuel knew. He'd lived with that lie for 55 years. The Army had needed a scapegoat for the intelligence failure that sent 8 men into an ambush. Samuel had been convenient, young, enlisted, expendable. They'd buried the truth in classified files and let Bobby Cross's widow believe her husband died because his sergeant was a coward. Samuel had never corrected her. What was the point? Bobby was still dead. Now Bobby's son had Maya. "I need to know," Hank said. "Are you done? Really done? Because if you are, I'll find another way. But Shepard, I'm asking, those kids need someone who knows how to fight dirty and doesn't care about coming home. Someone who's got nothing left to lose. Samuel looked at the photo wall, Martha's smile, Daniel's uniform, Maya's gap-toothed grin. He'd failed Bobby Cross. He'd failed Daniel. He'd pushed Maya away because he was too scared to lose her. But he hadn't lost her yet. I'll need a team, Samuel said. I know, Hank replied. How fast can you get to Phoenix? Samuel glanced at the clock. 4:53 in the morning. Give me 18 hours. See you at 2300, Hank paused. Shepard, thank you. Don't thank me yet, Samuel said. We're probably going to die. Better than dying in a hospital bed, Hank said and hung up. Samuel stood in his kitchen, phone still in his hand, feeling the weight of 55 years fall away. His hands were steady now. Fear and adrenaline did that. Gave you back your youth for a little while, just long enough to get you killed. He had 18 hours to drive to Phoenix, 18 hours to gather gear, load weapons, and become something he'd sworn he'd never be again. A soldier. Samuel moved through the cabin like a ghost, pulling equipment from hiding places Martha had never known about. The guns came first. 3 rifles, each one a piece of his history. The M40 sniper rifle from Desert Storm, woodstock worn smooth by his hands, scope still zeroed for 1,000 meters. A modern .300 Winchester Magnum, purchased in 2003 when he'd tried to teach Daniel long-range shooting and realized his old rifle couldn't keep up with modern ammunition. Daniel's own rifle, a customized Remington 700 that had come home from Iraq in a flag-draped box, while Daniel came home in an urn. He hadn't touched Daniel's rifle in 20 years. His hands shook as he lifted it from the case. I'm sorry, he whispered to the empty room. To Daniel's ghost. To Martha's memory. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. But I'm going to save her. The rifle didn't answer. Dead men never did. Ammunition, cold weather gear, medical supplies, a pack that had carried him through Desert Storm, and half a dozen mountain rescues after he'd come home. Everything went into his truck, a battered Ford that was older than most soldiers and twice as reliable. At 0600, he locked the cabin door and didn't look back. The drive to Phoenix took him south through West Virginia into Virginia, then west across Tennessee and Arkansas, through Oklahoma and New Mexico, finally dropping into Arizona as the sun set behind him like the burning oil fields he'd left in Iraq half a century ago. He drove straight through, stopping only for gas and coffee, his mind already in Montana, already planning. 200 hostiles, military-grade weapons, bunker complex, winter conditions, suicide mission. He'd run worse odds during Desert Storm. Of course, back then he'd been 23 and immortal. Now he was 72 and held together with scar tissue and bad choices. Didn't matter. Maya was up there, that made it simple. Phoenix sprawled across the desert like a circuit board, all lights and straight lines. Samuel hated cities. Too many people, too much noise. He navigated by instinct to an address Hank had texted him, a house in a neighborhood that had probably been nice in 1975 and had been dying slow ever since. Hank's house looked like Hank probably did, worn down, holding on, refusing to quit. Samuel parked and sat for a moment, gathering himself. His back ached from 18 hours of driving. His hands hurt. His head hurt. Everything hurt. Getting old was just pain management and stubbornness. The front door opened before he could knock. Hank stood there backlit, a silhouette Samuel would have known in hell or heaven or any place in between. They looked at each other for a long moment. 2 old men, 2 old soldiers, 2 survivors of wars the country had decided to forget. You look like shit, Shepard, Hank said. You're dying of cancer, Samuel replied. I win. Hank laughed, the sound rough and wet. Come inside. We've got work to do. The house was sparse. Furniture that looked military issue. Walls covered in maps and photographs. Medals in a shoebox on the mantel because Hank had never been the type to frame them. The place smelled like cigarettes and dust and old men living alone. Hank looked worse than his voice had suggested. Thin, gray, eyes sunken in a skull that didn't have much meat left on it. Cancer, stage 4, the kind that didn't get better. How long, Samuel asked. Doctors say 6 months. I say 3. Optimistic bastards, doctors. Hank moved to a table covered in maps and satellite photos. Samuel followed, his knees protesting. They stood side by side like they had 50 years ago, planning operations and plotting survival. The situation, Hank said. 32 federal agents, 24 Border Patrol, 8 FBI, Joint Task Force investigating weapons smuggling, 3-year operation, deep cover. The FBI had a man in-potting one of the smuggling networks, Agent Liam Torres, good man, Marine, Gulf War. He's been feeding intel for 3 years. Samuel studied the satellite photos, bunker complex, mountains, snow. What went wrong? Torres got made. Somebody high up tipped off the smugglers. The whole task force got ambushed 6 days ago. Coordinated. Professional. They never had a chance. Casualties. Unknown. Satellite shows heat signatures in the bunker. Could be 32, could be less. Pentagon won't confirm. Why not send in the cavalry? Politics, Hank said, and the word tasted like poison. Election year. Border security is a hot topic. Administration doesn't want headlines about federal agents dying on American soil. Easier to classify it, bury it, and wait for the news cycle to move on. They're going to let them die, Samuel said. They're going to let them die, Hank agreed. Unless we don't. Hank looked at him. I can't do this alone, Shepard. I'm dying. Got maybe 3 months of fight left in me. But I know 6 other men who might be crazy enough to help. The Wolves, Samuel said. Hank nodded. The Wolves. Samuel's unit. Desert Storm. 1991. 30 men had deployed to Iraq. 8 came home. Those 8 had scattered across America, trying to forget, trying to live, trying to pretend the war hadn't followed them home in their nightmares and their scars. They're old, Samuel said. We're all old. Old doesn't mean dead. Hank pulled out a list. Names, addresses. I've already made contact. They're waiting for your call. My call. You're Shepard, Hank said. You've always been Shepard. They'll follow you. Samuel looked at the names. Doc Jensen, Tiny Robinson, Preacher Williams, Tracker Nguyen, Ironside Kowalski. Men he hadn't seen in decades. Men who'd bled beside him. Men who'd earned the right to grow old in peace. And he was going to ask them to die. What's the play? Samuel asked. Hank spread out a topographical map. Malmstrom Bunker Complex, decommissioned Air Force facility, built during the Cold War to house ACBIM's 3 levels underground. Reinforced concrete. Blast doors, designed to survive a nuclear strike. How do we breach? We don't, Hank said. We make them come out. How? Hank smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Same way we did in the Gulf. We make ourselves a target they can't ignore. Samuel studied the map, the bunker, the terrain, the distances. His mind calculated fields of fire, approach routes, choke points. 50 years since Desert Storm, but the training never left. The instincts never died. I'll need a sniper position, he said. High ground, clear sight lines. Hank pointed to a ridge marked on the map. Cathedral Peak, 1,200 meters from the bunker. Elevation advantage. You'd have eyes on the whole complex. Weather, -15, 3 feet of snow, wind gusting to 40 knots. Perfect, Samuel said, meaning it. Bad weather meant thermal scopes wouldn't work right, meant visibility was limited, meant young soldiers with high-tech gear would be at a disadvantage, while old men who'd learned to fight with iron sights and patience would be just fine. How do we get there? Hank pulled out another map. Hiking route, 120 miles through Glacier National Park, 5 days on foot. Rough terrain, winter conditions, the kind of movement that would kill men half their age. Samuel nodded. When do we leave? Soon as we get the team together. I've got a safe house in Montana, 50 miles from the target. We stage there, prep, then move. And after we get the hostages out, we disappear. Canadian border is 20 miles north. We cross, lay low, wait for the heat to die down. Samuel looked at his old commander, his old friend. You know this is suicide. Hank met his eyes. I'm dying anyway, Shepard. Rather die doing something that matters than choking on my own blood in some hospital. And those kids up there, they've got their whole lives ahead of them. Seems like a fair trade. My last 3 months for their next 60 years. Samuel thought about Maya, 28 years old, her whole life ahead of her, all the things she hadn't done yet, all the people she hadn't saved yet, all the conversations Samuel had avoided because he was too scared to lose her. Fair trade, Samuel agreed. Hank pulled out a bottle of whiskey, old, expensive, the kind you save for special occasions or last times. He poured 2 glasses. To the wolves, Hank said. Samuel raised his glass. To the wolves. They drank. The whiskey burned going down, familiar and sharp, and tasting like youth and violence, and all the things they tried to forget. Now, Hank said, let's go get our girl. Samuel made the calls that night from Hank's kitchen. sitting at a table that wobbled, drinking coffee that tasted like battery acid, talking to ghosts. Doc Jensen answered on the third ring. Still awake at midnight because old men didn't sleep, they just waited for morning. He lived in Oregon now, ran a veterinary clinic, spent his days putting animals back together because he couldn't save the men he'd watched die in the desert. Doc, Samuel said, it's Shepard. Silence. Then, Lord Almighty, Shepard. Been what, 15 years? 20, Samuel said. I need your help. Another pause. This about Montana? How'd you know? I still read newspapers. 32 agents missing. Figured that'd get your attention eventually. What do you need? Medical kit, field surgery gear, and a man who knows how to keep people alive when they shouldn't be. I'm 71 years old, Shepard. My hands shake. I can barely see without glasses. Can you still stop bleeding? Yeah. Can you still set bones? Yeah. Then you're exactly who I need. Doc was quiet for a long time. Then, where and when? Montana. 3 days. I'll send coordinates. I'll be there, Doc said, and hung up. Tiny Robinson was next, Texas. 6'4" and 240 pounds in his youth, probably still massive now. He'd been their demolitions expert, the kind of man who could look at a structure and tell you exactly where to put the charges to drop it clean. He ran a construction company now, still blowing things up, just legally. Tiny answered on the first ring. His voice sounded like gravel in a blender. Whoever you are, it's midnight. This better be good. It's Shepard. Tiny's laugh boomed through the phone. Shepard, you old bastard. Heard you were dead. Not yet. Shame. Would have made a hell of a funeral. What do you want? Remember how you used to say you missed blowing shit up? Yeah. How'd you like to do it one more time? Legal or illegal? Does it matter? Not even a little bit, Tiny said. I'm in. 3 days. Montana. Bring your toys. Roger that, Shepard. Hey, is this about them missing agents? Yeah. Good, Tiny said. Been too long since I killed anyone who deserved it. Preacher Williams was harder. Alabama. Baptist minister now. Spent his days saving souls instead of taking lives. But he'd been their communications specialist during the Gulf War. Could jury-rig a radio out of spare parts and prayer. Could tap enemy communications. Could ghost through their networks like smoke. Samuel explained the situation. Preacher listened, didn't interrupt. When Samuel finished, there was a long silence. Brother, Preacher said finally, my congregation needs me. I got a sermon to preach Sunday. I got weddings and funerals and people counting on me. I know, Samuel said. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Those agents, Preacher said, they got families? Most of them. Children? Some. Another long silence. Then Preacher sighed. Samuel could picture him, older now, gray-haired, worn down by years of trying to explain God to people who didn't want to listen. Jesus said there's no greater love than laying down your life for your friends, Preacher said. Guess he'd understand if I missed one sermon. Count me in. Tracker Nguyen answered in Vietnamese, then switched to English when he heard Samuel's voice. California now. Wilderness guide. He'd been South Vietnamese, fought alongside the Americans during the war, escaped when Saigon fell in 1975. Came to America, joined the Army, deployed to Desert Storm as a scout, could track a man through terrain so hostile you couldn't see 3 feet, could move through enemy territory like he was invisible. I knew you would call, Tracker said. I saw the news. You coming? I owe America everything, Tracker said simply. I was a refugee. This country took me in, gave me a home, a life. If American soldiers need help, I help. No question. Last one was Ironside Kowalski. Michigan, factory worker. Retired now. Early Parkinson's. Hands that shook. He'd been their heavy weapons specialist. M60 machine gun. Could lay down suppressing fire that sounded like the end of the world. His wife answered. Said Ironside was sleeping. Samuel almost hung up. Then he heard rustling. Ironside's voice rough with sleep and age. Shepard? Yeah. Finally, been waiting for this call for 20 years. You got Parkinson's, Samuel said. Your hands shake. So do yours. Arthritis, right? Yeah. Then we'll shake together. I can still pull a trigger. I can still kill. And I'd rather die fighting than die sitting in a recliner watching game shows. When and where? Samuel gave him the coordinates. Ironside's wife was saying something in the background. Arguing. Ironside covered the phone. Muffled conversation. Then he came back. She says I'm crazy. Says I'm gonna get killed. She's probably right. You don't have to come, Samuel said. Yeah, Ironside said. I do. Because if I don't and those agents die, I'll have to live with that. And Shepard, I'm too old to live with more ghosts. 3 days. Montana. Roger. Hey, Shepard. Yeah, good to hear your voice. Yours too, Samuel said, and meant it. By 0200, he had his team. 6 old men, Desert Storm veterans, cumulative age over 400 years, cumulative combat experience that would make modern special operations soldiers look like children playing war. They were broken, they were old, they were dying. They were exactly what Samuel needed. Hank had been watching from the doorway. You got them all, he said. It wasn't a question. Everyone. Good. Hank moved to the table, pulled out a folder. This is everything I've got on Rick Cross. Samuel opened it. Photos, service records, business filings, a life documented in paper and ink. Rick Cross looked like his father. Same square jaw, same serious eyes. Bobby would have been proud of the man his son became, right up until the point where Rick became a criminal. There was a photo of Bobby, young, smiling, taken somewhere in Saudi Arabia before the ground offensive, before the ambush, before everything went wrong. Samuel touched the photo with fingers that trembled. I couldn't save him, Hank. I know. He died thinking it mattered. I promised him it mattered. Maybe it did, Hank said. Maybe saving his son counts. His son is trying to kill federal agents. His son thinks you murdered his father. Maybe if he knew the truth, things would be different. Samuel looked at his old friend. You want me to talk to him? I want you to try. Hank pulled out an envelope, old, yellowed, unopened. This came to me in 1991, letter Bobby wrote to his son before the ground offensive. Was supposed to go to Bobby's wife if he died, got lost in the bureaucracy, didn't surface until 2003. By then, Bobby's wife was dead. I held on to it, didn't know what else to do with it. Samuel took the envelope, could feel the weight of it. The history, what's it say? Read it, Hank said. Samuel opened the envelope carefully. The paper inside was fragile, 55 years old. The handwriting was shaky but readable. A young man's hand, a father writing to a son he'd never meet. Dear Rick, the letter began. If you're reading this, I didn't make it home. Samuel read. His hands shook. Not from arthritis, from something else. Something that felt like grief and guilt in 55 years of carrying weight that wasn't his to carry. The letter was short, 3 paragraphs. Bobby talked about duty and honor and sacrifice. He talked about the men he served with. And then at the end, he wrote the words that hit Samuel like bullets. I'm with a good man. Sergeant Dockery, best soldier I've ever known. If I die, it won't be his fault. It'll be because war is hell, and sometimes good men die anyway. If you ever meet him, thank him. He kept us alive longer than anyone else could have. I'm proud to serve beside him. Love, Dad. Samuel folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope, looked at Hank. Bobby didn't blame me. No, Hank said, he didn't. The Army lied. The Army lied. Rick grew up thinking I killed his father. And now he's trying to kill your granddaughter, Hank said. Funny how these things come around. Samuel put the letter in his pocket, felt the weight of it, felt 55 years of guilt shift just slightly. Not gone, never gone, but maybe, just maybe, a little lighter. I'm going to give this to Rick, Samuel said, before or after you shoot him. Depends on whether he gives Maya back. Hank smiled. Grim. That's my shepherd. Always practical. They spent the rest of the night planning maps, routes, equipment lists, contingencies, the kind of detailed preparation that kept soldiers alive when everything went wrong, which it always did. At 0600, Samuel stood to leave. Hank walked him to the door. They stood there, 2 old men in the gray dawn light, looking at each other across 50 years of friendship and war and loss. Shepard, Hank said, there's a good chance we don't come back from this. I know. You good with that? Samuel thought about Martha, about Daniel, about Maya trapped in a bunker with 200 hostiles and nobody coming to save her except a handful of old men who should have been dead already. I've been dying since 1991, Samuel said. Might as well make it count. Hank held out his hand. Samuel took it. They shook. A promise, a pact, the kind old soldiers made when words weren't enough. 3 days, Hank said. Montana, we go get our girl. 3 days, Samuel agreed. He drove back to West Virginia in the morning light. 18 hours to think, to remember, to prepare for what was probably going to be the last mission of his life. The cabin felt different when he got back. Smaller, like a place he was already leaving behind. He spent the next 2 days packing, sorting, making arrangements. He wrote a will, left everything to Maya. The cabin, the land, the rifles, the photographs, everything a 72-year-old man accumulated over a lifetime of trying to outrun ghosts. On the third day, he loaded his truck and took one last look at the photo wall. Martha smiled at him. Daniel stood proud in his dress blues. Maya grinned her gap-toothed grin. "I'm coming, baby girl," Samuel whispered to Maya's photo. "Hold on, Grandpa's coming." He locked the door, got in his truck, drove north toward Montana and snow and mountains and the last fight of his life. The nightmares would follow him. They always did. Bobby Cross dying in a desert bunker. Daniel coming home in a flag-draped box. Martha's hand going cold in his. But tonight, maybe he could add one more ghost to the collection. Or maybe, just maybe, he could save one person from becoming a ghost at all. Samuel Dockery pointed his truck north and drove into the gathering dark. 72 years old, arthritic, haunted, and more dangerous than he'd been in half a century. Behind him, West Virginia disappeared in the rearview mirror. Ahead, Montana waited with snow and violence, and a granddaughter who needed her grandfather to be what he'd always been. A shepherd, the last shepherd. And shepherds, Samuel knew, protected their flock. Even if it killed them, especially if it killed them. He drove through the night, hands steady on the wheel, mind already in the mountains, already planning the impossible, already preparing to bring Maya home. Or die trying. Montana in January was a kind of cold that didn't just chill your bones. It crawled inside them, made a home there. The kind of cold that turned breath into ice crystals and made every step feel like walking through broken glass. Samuel stood in the parking lot of a shuttered gas station 40 miles south of the Canadian border, watching 6 old men climb out of vehicles that had seen better decades. The wind cut through his coat like it wasn't even there. Temperature maybe 5 degrees. Felt like 20 below with the wind chill. This was his team, his army, 6 men who'd fought beside him in the Iraqi desert 35 years ago. Doc Jensen emerged from a Ford Ranger that had more rust than paint. 71 years old, thin as a fence post, wire-rimmed glasses that caught the weak winter sun. He wore a coat that looked military surplus and carried a duffel bag that clinked with the sound of medical instruments. His hands shook as he closed the truck door. Not fear, just age. Just the slow betrayal of nerves that didn't fire quite right anymore. "Doc," Samuel said. "Shepherd," Doc replied. They shook hands. Doc's grip was still strong despite the tremor. "You look old. You look dead." Doc grinned. "Not yet. Ask me again in 5 days." Tiny Robinson unfolded from a pickup truck that sagged under his weight. 6'4", 240 pounds. Still massive despite the years trying to whittle him down. His knees creaked when he stood. Old injuries from the Gulf War, when they'd spent weeks living in armored vehicles that weren't designed for men his size. He had a face like a cliff and hands that could crush cinder blocks. "Shepherd?" Tiny rumbled. His voice sounded like gravel in a cement mixer. "Hell of a place for a reunion." "Could have been Hawaii," Samuel said. "Could have been," Tiny agreed. "But then we wouldn't get to freeze our asses off. Where's the fun in that?" Preacher Williams arrived in a sedan so clean it looked like he washed it every morning and twice on Sundays. Probably did. 69 years old. Hair gone white. He wore a coat and tie under his winter jacket because some habits died hard. He'd been a communications specialist during Desert Storm. Baptist minister now, spent 40 years trying to reconcile a God of love with the things he'd seen men do to each other. "Brothers," preacher said, "good to see you all breathing." "Give it 5 days," Tiny said. "Breathing's optional where we're going." Tracker Nguyen came next, driving a Jeep that looked like it had been to hell and back and enjoyed the trip. 70 years old, Vietnamese-American, South Vietnamese Army originally, escaped Saigon in 1975, joined the U.S. Army, deployed to Desert Storm as their scout. He was small, compact, moved like smoke, could track a man through terrain so hostile you couldn't see your own boots. "Shepherd," Tracker said quietly. His English still carried an accent after 50 years in America. "Good to see you." "You too," Samuel said. Ironside Kowalski's truck arrived last, loud and belching smoke. 72 years old, same as Samuel. Michigan factory worker, retired. Hands that shook from early-stage Parkinson's. He climbed out slow, careful, like a man made of glass who might shatter if he moved too fast. But his eyes were sharp, alert. The eyes of a man who'd spent months in Iraq behind an M60 machine gun, raining hell on anyone stupid enough to get in range. His wife had driven him. She got out too, 50-ish, worried eyes. She looked at the assembled old men like they were crazy, which they probably were. "You don't have to do this," she said to Ironside. Her voice carried across the parking lot. "You've got Parkinson's. You can barely hold a coffee cup." "I can hold a trigger," Ironside said. "That's all that matters. They'll kill you. Maybe." Ironside kissed her forehead. "But at least I'll die doing something that matters instead of dying in a chair watching TV." She was crying. Samuel looked away, gave them privacy for their goodbye, watched the mountains instead. The Rockies rose in the distance like broken teeth. Somewhere up there, Maya was waiting, if she was still alive. Had to be alive. Had to be. Ironside's wife left, drove away without looking back because if she looked back, she'd try to stop him, and they both knew she couldn't. The old men stood in the parking lot, 6 of them plus Samuel, watching her taillights disappear. "Well," Tiny said into the silence, "this is cheerful as hell." Hank Reeves emerged from the gas station, 68 years old and dying of cancer that was eating his lungs one cell at a time. He looked worse than he had in Phoenix. Thinner, grayer, like death was already reaching for him and he was too stubborn to go quietly. "Gentlemen," Hank said, "welcome to Montana. Let's go save some lives." The safe house was an old hunting cabin 20 miles into the national forest. No electricity, no running water. Heat from a wood stove that probably violated every fire code ever written. It was perfect, remote, defensible. The kind of place you could disappear into and the world would forget you existed. They gathered inside, 7 old men crowding around a table covered in maps and satellite photos. The cabin smelled like wood smoke and gun oil and the particular musk of old men who'd stopped caring what they smelled like. Hank spread out the maps, tapped a point marked in red. "Malmstrom Bunker Complex," he said. "Built 1962, decommissioned 1995. Designed to house intercontinental ballistic missiles during the Cold War. 3 levels underground. Reinforced concrete walls. Blast doors rated to survive a near miss from a nuclear weapon. 1 main entrance. 2 emergency exits, both sealed." "How many hostiles?" Doc asked. "Best estimate, 90 to 100. Blackridge Solutions contractors. Former military, well-armed, well-trained, professional." "And we're 7 old men," Preacher said. "7 old men who've been killing people since before most of Blackridge was born," Hank replied. 7 old men who know how to fight dirty." Tiny leaned over the map. "What's the approach?" Hank traced a route. 120 miles on foot. 5 days minimum through Glacier National Park backcountry. Winter conditions. Deep snow. Sub-zero temperatures. Rough terrain. The kind of movement that kills people. "Sounds lovely," Ironside said. His hands trembled as he studied the map. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow at first light. Tonight we prep. Check gear. Go over the plan. Get some sleep." "Sleep," Tiny snorted. "Right, because we'll all sleep great knowing we're walking into a meat grinder." Samuel spoke for the first time since they'd arrived. His voice cut through the chatter like a knife. "We've all walked into worse. The ground offensive in 91, the Basra Highway. Scud missile attacks. We're still here. Most of our enemies aren't. That should tell you something." The room went quiet. 7 old men remembering. Remembering sfoignen and blood and heat that made you feel like you were breathing through a wet blanket. Remembering friends who'd died. Remembering the weight of bodies they'd carried. Remembering everything they'd spent 35 years trying to forget. "Shepard's right," Hank said. "You've survived worse. You'll survive this." "Or we won't," Doc said quietly. "And that's okay too. We're old. We've lived full lives. Those kids in that bunker haven't. Seems like a fair trade." Samuel looked at Doc, saw the fear there, the doubt, but saw the determination too. The willingness to die if it meant someone else got to live. "Fair trade," Samuel agreed. They spent the evening preparing, checking weapons, sorting ammunition, packing gear. Old men moving with the practiced efficiency of soldiers who'd done this 1,000 times. Some things you never forgot. Some things lived in your muscles and your bones deeper than memory. Samuel cleaned his rifles. The M40 from Desert Storm, the .300 Winchester Magnum. Each one a tool, each one familiar as his own hands. He ran a cloth down the barrel of the M40, feeling the worn grooves, the places where 35 years of use had left their mark. Tracker sat beside him, working on his own rifle. They didn't talk, didn't need to. Some conversations happened in silence. "You think we can do this?" Tracker said eventually. His English was good, but still carried that accent. 7 old men against 100 young soldiers. We did it before, Samuel said. Desert Storm, you remember? Coalition forces against the Republican Guard. We won. Coalition had air support, artillery, resupply. We've got surprise. We've got experience. We've got nothing to lose. Samuel looked at Tracker. You scared? Tracker smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, terrified. You. Yeah. Good, Tracker said. Means we're not stupid. Stupid men die first. Across the cabin, Tiny and Ironside were arguing about ammunition loadouts. Tiny wanted to bring the M60 machine gun. Ironside said his hands shook too much to carry it. Tiny said that's why God invented bipods. Preacher sat in the corner reading a Bible by lamplight. His lips moved silently. Praying maybe, or just trying to find something in the words that explained why good men had to do terrible things to stop terrible men from doing worse things. Doc organized medical supplies, bandages, morphine, surgical tools, the kind of gear you hoped you wouldn't need but knew you would. He moved with the calm efficiency of a man who'd sewn up bullet holes in field hospitals while people screamed and bled and begged for their mothers. Hank coughed, deep, wet, the kind of cough that rattled in your chest and tasted like blood. He stepped outside. Samuel followed. The night was clear, cold enough to make your lungs hurt. Stars scattered across the sky like broken glass. No moon. That was good. Moon made shadows. Shadows got you killed. How bad is it? Samuel asked. Hank lit a cigarette, took a drag, coughed again. Doctors give me 3 months. I give me 1. Cancer's in my lungs. Liver. Probably my brain by now. Hard to tell. Everything hurts. You don't have to do this. You could go home. Spend your time with family. Don't have family. Wife left in '83. Kids don't talk to me. All I've got is this. Hank gestured at the cabin, at the mountains beyond, at the mission waiting in the darkness. This is my family. You. The wolves. Those kids in that bunker. This is what matters. We might die. Shepard. I'm already dying. Only question is whether I die in a hospital bed or die doing something that matters. This, he took another drag, this matters. They stood in the cold, 2 old soldiers, 2 old friends, looking at stars that had watched them grow from young men into old men into something harder to name. You scared? Samuel asked. Terrified, Hank said. You. Every damn day since 1991, Samuel replied. Inside, the others were settling down for the night, sleeping bags on the floor, snoring already from Tiny, who could sleep anywhere. The cabin creaked in the wind. Wood smoke drifted from the stove. It smelled like every field camp Samuel had ever been in. Temporary. Fragile. Home. Samuel lay in his sleeping bag and stared at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. It never did before an operation. His mind ran through the plan, the approach, the contingencies, all the ways this could go wrong. Maya's face floated in his memory. 7 years old. Gap-toothed grin. She'd asked him once if he was scared during the war. He'd lied and said no. Heroes weren't supposed to be scared. Now he knew better. Heroes were just people who were scared and did the thing anyway. Hold on, baby girl, he whispered to the darkness. Grandpa's coming. Tomorrow they would start walking. 120 miles through winter and mountains and terrain that would kill younger men. Tomorrow they would begin the last mission of their lives. Tonight they were just old men trying to sleep, trying not to think about all the ways they could fail, trying not to count the hours they had left. The wind howled outside like all the ghosts they'd left in Iraq, crying to be remembered. First light came cold and gray. Samuel woke to the sound of Tiny making coffee on the wood stove. The big man moved quiet despite his size. Old habits. In the desert, noise got you killed. 35 years later, and he still moved like he was behind enemy lines. They ate in silence. Oatmeal, dried fruit, the kind of food that stuck to your ribs and kept you moving. Doc handed out vitamins, joint supplements, the old man pharmacy, pills to keep the machinery running just a little longer. Hank spread the map one last time, traced the route with a finger that trembled slightly. Not from fear, from the cancer eating him alive. 5 days to the target, he said. Maybe 6 if weather turns bad. We move slow, stay off trails, avoid contact. This isn't a fighting patrol. It's infiltration. We get there, we recon, we plan, then we execute. What if we run into Black Ridge patrols? Ironside asked. We avoid them, Hank said. But if we can't avoid them, we eliminate them. Quietly. No gunfire unless absolutely necessary. Tracker and Shepard handle close kills. The rest of you stay hidden. Rules of engagement, Preacher asked. Don't die, Hank said. And don't let the enemy know we're coming. Everything else is flexible. They loaded packs, 60 pounds each, heavy but manageable. Food, water, ammunition, cold weather gear, medical supplies, everything they needed to survive in wilderness that didn't care if you lived or died. Samuel checked his rifle one last time. The M40, 35 years old, woodstock worn smooth by his hands. Scope zeroed for 1,000 meters. He'd killed men with this rifle, saved men with this rifle. It was as much a part of him as his own arm. Ready, Shepard? Hank asked. Samuel shouldered his pack, felt the weight settle, felt his knees protest, felt every one of his 72 years. Ready, he said. They walked into the wilderness at 0700, 7 old men in single file. Tracker in front, reading the terrain, finding the easiest routes. Samuel second, because if they hit trouble, the sniper needed to be up front. Then Doc, Preacher, Tiny, Ironside, with Hank bringing up the rear. The snow was 3 feet deep, crusty on top where the cold had frozen it, soft underneath where it hadn't. Each step broke through. Each step was an effort, like walking through wet concrete. By noon, they'd covered 5 miles. Samuel's knees burned, his lungs burned. The cold air cut like razors with every breath. Behind him, he heard Ironside struggling, heard Doc's labored breathing. 7 old men trying to move like they were 23 again, and their bodies screaming that those days were gone. They stopped for a break in a stand of pine trees. Sat in the snow because standing took too much effort. Tiny passed around a thermos of coffee. It was cold already, but nobody complained. Cold coffee was still coffee. How you holding up? Samuel asked Ironside. The old machine gunner's hands shook as he drank. His face was red from exertion. He was breathing hard. Been better, Ironside admitted. Been worse, too. Remember after the ceasefire, walking 40 miles to the extraction point, carrying wounded. This is a cakewalk compared to that. We were 23 then, Doc pointed out. Details, Tiny said. They moved again. Afternoon stretched into evening. The temperature dropped. The wind picked up. Snow started falling. Not a storm, just the mountains reminding them who was in charge. Tracker found them a campsite in a hollow sheltered by rocks. They set up cold camp. No fire. Fire meant smoke, and smoke meant someone might see them. They ate cold rations and crawled into sleeping bags and tried to ignore the cold that seeped through every layer. Samuel lay awake listening to the others breathe. Tiny snored. Ironside muttered in his sleep. Nightmares probably. They all had nightmares. Hank coughed. Samuel heard him try to muffle it, heard him fail. The cough sounded wet, sick. The sound of a man whose body was eating itself. Day 2 was harder. The terrain got rougher, steeper. They climbed ridges that left them gasping, descended into valleys where the snow was deeper and each step felt like drowning. Doc fell twice, got up both times without complaint. Preacher helped him. The minister's face was gray with exhaustion, but his eyes were calm, accepting. If he died out here, at least it would be in service of something. They covered 4 miles, made camp in another hollow. Doc checked everyone for frostbite, found the early stages on Ironside's toes, wrapped them, gave him extra socks, told him to stay off his feet as much as possible. Ironside laughed. It sounded like broken glass. I'm hiking 120 miles through a frozen hell, and you want me to stay off my feet. Sure, Doc, I'll just float. You know what I mean? Yeah, Ironside said. His hands shook worse now. From the cold or the Parkinson's, hard to tell. I know, thanks. That night, Tracker cooked rabbit. He caught it in a snare so simple, Samuel had almost missed it. They ate the meat cold, raw, because fire was still too dangerous. It tasted like survival. Day 3 brought them into higher elevations. The mountains rose around them like walls. The wind screamed through passes and over ridges. The cold was a living thing now. Malevolent, hunting them. They found evidence of human activity, boot prints in the snow, maybe 2 days old. 4 men moving south. Black Ridge Patrol, probably. Tracker studied the prints, looked at Samuel. They were here. Samuel knelt beside the tracks. Read the story they told. 4 men, heavy packs, moving fast but not panicked. Professional. They'd passed within a mile of where the wolves had camped 2 nights ago. We're in their operational area now, Samuel said. From here on, we assume we're being watched. They moved slower after that, more careful. Tracker scouted ahead, ghosting through the trees like he'd done in Iraq. The others followed in his tracks, stepping where he stepped, using the path he'd cleared. At 1500 hours, Tracker raised his fist. Everyone froze. Samuel moved forward, slow, silent, reached Tracker's position. The small man pointed down into a valley. Samuel followed the gesture. 4 men, black-rich contractors, young, well-equipped, high-tech gear, thermal scopes, encrypted radios. They moved in tactical formation, weapons ready, sweeping the valley. "Looking for us?" Tracker whispered. "Maybe," Samuel replied, "or just patrolling. Either way, we can't let them see us." They watched. 20 minutes. The patrol moved through the valley and disappeared into the trees on the far side. The wolves waited another 30 minutes. Then they moved, taking a route that kept the ridgeline between them and where the patrol had been. That night, they made a camp in a cave. Small, barely enough room for 7 men. But it was shelter from the wind and hidden from thermal scopes, and that made it worth the cramped conditions. Hank coughed blood into a handkerchief, tried to hide it, didn't quite manage. "How long?" Samuel asked quietly. Hank looked at the blood on the cloth, folded it carefully, put it away. "Days, maybe a week. Cancer's moving fast now." "Will you make it to the bunker?" "I'll make it." Hank's smile was grim. "I didn't come all this way to die in a cave." Day 4 was the hardest. They climbed. The mountains didn't care that they were old, didn't care that their knees screamed and their lungs burned, and every breath felt like swallowing broken glass. The mountains just were, indifferent, eternal. Ironside fell, slid 20 feet down a slope before Tiny caught him. The big man hauled him back up like Ironside weighed nothing. But Samuel could see the strain in Tiny's face, could see the exhaustion. "We need to rest," Doc said. "No time," Hank replied. "We're behind schedule. Weather's turning. If we don't reach the bunker by tomorrow night, we'll be caught in a storm." They pushed on. Afternoon turned to evening. Evening turned to dark. They moved by starlight and memory, and the kind of stubbornness that kept old men alive when they should have been dead. At 2200, they crested a ridge and saw it. The bunker complex spread below them. Distant, maybe 3 miles, but visible. Lights, buildings, the shapes of men moving between structures. "There," Tracker said. "Our target." Samuel pulled out binoculars, scanned the complex, counted buildings, counted lights, estimated personnel. The tactical part of his brain, the part that never slept, started calculating fields of fire and approach routes and all the ways to kill men who needed killing. "Tomorrow," Hank said. "Tomorrow we get closer. Tomorrow we recon. Tomorrow we find out if your granddaughter is still alive." Samuel didn't answer, just kept looking through the binoculars. Somewhere down there, Maya was waiting. Dead or alive, tortured or whole. He'd know soon. "Hold on, baby girl," he thought. "One more day. Just hold on one more day." They camped on the ridge. No shelter except what they could make from tarps and snow. The wind cut through everything. The cold was brutal. Tiny and Ironside huddled together for warmth. Doc and Preacher did the same. Tracker sat alone, watching the bunker, memorizing patterns. Samuel sat with Hank. The colonel looked bad. Worse than bad. His skin was gray. His breathing labored. The cancer was winning and they both knew it. "You did good, Shepard," Hank said. "Getting us here. Keeping us alive. I couldn't have done it without you. You would have found a way. Maybe." Hank coughed, wiped blood from his lips. "Or maybe I'd be dead in some hospital." "This is better. This matters." "You matter," Samuel said. Hank smiled. It looked painful. "I'm dying, Shepard. Have been for months. Only question was how. This," he gestured at the mountains, at the bunker below, at the mission that would probably kill them all. "This is how I want to go. Fighting, saving lives, making a difference." They sat in silence, 2 old soldiers watching the enemy camp, planning, calculating, preparing for what came next. In the morning, they would move closer. In the morning, they would scout the bunker. In the morning, they would find out if this whole insane mission had any chance of success. But for now, they were just 7 old men on a mountain, cold and tired and scared, trying to stay alive one more night. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent, eternal. The same stars that had watched them in Iraq. The same stars that would watch them die here if they weren't careful. If they weren't good. If they weren't lucky. Samuel closed his eyes, tried to sleep, Failed. His mind kept showing him Maya's face. 7 years old, 28 years old, dead. He opened his eyes, looked at the bunker lights in the distance. "I'm coming," he whispered. "Ready or not, here I come." Day 5 dawned clear and brutally cold. -20 with wind chill that made exposed skin hurt in seconds. Samuel's joints were frozen solid. It took 10 minutes of careful movement before his knees would bend properly. They ate the last of their rations, drank the last of their water. From here on, they'd be on emergency supplies, living off adrenaline and stubbornness and the knowledge that turning back wasn't an option. Tracker led them down the ridge, slow, careful, using every scrap of cover. They moved like ghosts, like shadows, old men who'd learned in the desert how to become invisible. At noon, they reached a position 1,000 meters from the bunker. Samuel set up his rifle on a flat rock, settled in behind the scope, started cataloging targets. The bunker complex was bigger than the satellite photos had suggested. 12 buildings above ground, barracks, command center, motor pool, all surrounded by a fence that wouldn't stop a determined assault but would slow one down. He counted men. 93, young, fit, well-armed. They moved with military precision. Former soldiers, all of them, probably special operations, the kind of men who'd been trained to kill efficiently and without remorse. And the wolves were 7 old men with rifles older than most of the enemy. Samuel smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. The enemy had numbers and youth and technology. But the wolves had patience, had experience, had surprise. Sometimes that was enough. He scanned windows, looking for any sign of the hostages, found nothing on the above-ground structures. They'd be underground then, in the bunker itself, 3 levels down, behind blast doors and concrete walls designed to survive nuclear war. Tracker appeared at his elbow, silent as smoke. "Movement," he said. "Northwest corner." Samuel swung the rifle, found the target, a man in tactical gear, walking the perimeter, radio on his hip, rifle slung, professional but not quite alert, routine patrol. He'd done this 1,000 times and stopped expecting trouble. That would get him killed. "Not yet," Samuel said. "We watch. We learn. We don't engage until we're ready." They spent the afternoon watching, documenting. Tracker drew maps of the patrol routes. Tiny identified the generator building and the fuel tanks. Weak points, places that would burn. Doc studied the medical facility, memorizing its location in case they had wounded. Preacher listened to radio traffic through a scanner he'd built from spare parts and prayer. Ironside just watched, his shaking hands steady when they gripped binoculars. Hank sat beside Samuel. The colonel's breathing was worse, rattling, each breath a struggle. "What do you see?" Hank asked. "Prison," Samuel said. "Or a fort. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. 93 hostiles, rotating patrols, good discipline, good training. They're not going to be easy." "Nothing good ever is." Hank coughed, spat blood into the snow. "When do we hit them?" "Tomorrow night," Samuel said. "We need one more day of observation. Need to find where they're keeping the hostages. Need to identify their command structure. You kill the head, the body dies." "Shepard, I might not have tomorrow night. Cancer's moving fast." "Then you have today. Make it count." They watched until dark. As the sun set, lights came on in the bunker complex. Halogen floods that turned night into day, bad for the wolves. Lights meant shadows, and shadows meant places to hide. But the lights also destroyed night vision, made thermal scopes less effective. Trade-offs. Everything in combat was trade-offs. At 1900, Samuel saw something that made his breath catch. Prisoners being moved between buildings. 31 of them, hands bound, guards on all sides. They looked beaten, exhausted. Some could barely walk, but they were alive. And one of them, small and dark-haired and moving with a particular way that Samuel had memorized over 28 years, was Maya. His granddaughter was alive. Samuel's hands tightened on the rifle. Every instinct screamed to shoot, to start killing, to burn that whole complex to the ground and pull Maya out of the ashes. He took a breath, let it out slow. Patience. Patience kills. Rushing dies. "I see her," Samuel said quietly. "Southeast building. They're moving prisoners. Maya's with them." Hank looked through his own binoculars, found the group, watched them disappear into a building. "She looks okay. Roughed up, but mobile." "She's alive," Samuel said. "That's enough. Now we just have to keep her that way," Hank replied. They pulled back as full dark fell, Moved to a secondary position 500 meters west. Made cold camp again. No fire, no light. Just 7 old men huddled in sleeping bags, eating cold food, preparing for what came next. Samuel couldn't sleep. Maya's face haunted him. She looked thin, pale but alive. Alive was everything. Tracker sat watch. The small man never seemed to sleep, never seemed to tire. He sat cross-legged, rifle across his knees, watching the darkness like it might sprout enemies at any moment. "You saw her," Tracker said without looking at Samuel. "Yeah, you feel better now, knowing she lives." "No," Samuel said. "Now I'm terrified we'll screw up and get her killed." Fear is good, keeps you sharp, makes you careful. They sat in comfortable silence. 2 old soldiers who'd spent 35 years learning to communicate without words. "During the war," Tracker said eventually, "I was afraid every day, every single day. I thought I would die, thought we all would die, but we didn't. Some of us made it home. You know why?" Samuel shook his head. "Because we were too stubborn to die, too angry, too determined. The young soldiers, they fought for honor or duty or country. We fought to survive, to go home, to live. That made us dangerous." "And now," Samuel asked, "now we fight for your granddaughter, for those hostages, for something bigger than ourselves. That makes us even more dangerous. Because old men with nothing to lose and everything to prove, we are the scariest thing in the world." Samuel looked at his friend, saw the truth in Tracker's eyes, saw the steel. "Tomorrow we make our move," Samuel said. "Tomorrow," Tracker agreed, "we show them what old wolves can do." The night stretched long and cold. The stars watched. The mountains waited. And in the bunker below, 93 young soldiers slept, unaware that death was coming for them. Death in the form of 7 old men who'd killed before and would kill again. Death in the form of a shepherd who'd come to protect his flock. Samuel Dockery closed his eyes and dreamed of fire and blood and bringing his granddaughter home. Tomorrow, the war would begin. Tonight, he was just an old man on a mountain, cold and scared and more dangerous than he'd been in 35 years. The last shepherd, watching over his flock. And tomorrow, God help anyone who stood between him and Maya. Samuel had killed his first man at 19. A North Vietnamese regular who'd come out of the jungle like a ghost. Samuel had been faster. The man had died surprised. That was 53 years ago, and Samuel still remembered his face. Tonight, he would probably kill again. The difference was, tonight he didn't feel young anymore. Didn't feel invincible. Just felt old and cold and scared. But scared didn't matter. Maya mattered. Those 31 hostages mattered. Everything else was just noise. The plan was simple. Simple plans usually work better than complicated ones. Complicated plans had too many moving parts, too many ways to fail. Samuel would walk up to the front gate, hands visible, no weapons except the sidearm he knew they'd take from him. He'd surrender, ask to speak to Rick Cross, deliver Bobby's letter, try to talk sense into a man who'd spent his whole life believing a lie. While Rick was distracted, the wolves would move into position. Tiny would rig the generators to blow. Preacher would hack their communications. Tracker and Doc would move to the hostage building. Ironside would set up the M60 in overwatch position. And Hank would do what Hank did best. Command, coordinate, keep everyone alive long enough to make the impossible happen. It was a terrible plan. It relied on too many variables. On Rick being willing to talk. On the wolves not being spotted. On everything going right when nothing ever went right in combat. But it was the only plan they had. Samuel checked his gear one last time. Bobby's letter in his left breast pocket. Right over his heart. The M1911 pistol on his hip. Loaded, 7 rounds. Not much, but enough to start trouble if talking failed. The others were scattered across the ridgeline. Dark shapes against darker rocks. Waiting for Samuel's signal, Hank appeared beside him. The colonel looked like death warmed over. His skin was gray, his eyes sunken. The cancer was eating him alive, and they both knew he didn't have much time left. "You don't have to do this," Hank said. "We could find another way." "There is no other way. You know it. I know it. This is the play. You could die." Samuel smiled. It felt strange on his face. Could have died 50 years ago in a crater on Hill 875. Could have died 1,000 times since. Still here. Maybe I'm too stubborn to die. Or maybe your luck's about to run out. Maybe. Samuel looked at his old friend, his old commander. The man who'd pulled him out of that crater and told him he wasn't a coward, wasn't a failure, was just a soldier who'd survived when others hadn't. If I don't make it back, you get Maya out. You get all of them out. That's an order. I don't take orders from sergeants, Hank said, but I'll do it anyway. For you, for Bobby, for all of us who didn't make it home. They shook hands. It felt final, like goodbye. Samuel started walking. The distance from the ridgeline to the bunker gate was maybe 800 meters. Downhill, open ground. Every step took him farther from cover and closer to men with guns who had orders to shoot intruders. His knees hurt. His back hurt. Everything hurt. But he kept walking. The guards saw him when he was 300 meters out. He saw them react, saw them raise rifles, saw them speak into radios. Reinforcements would be coming. That was fine. That was the plan. Samuel raised his hands, kept walking. At 100 meters, a voice called out through a loudspeaker. "Stop right there. Identify yourself." Samuel stopped. "My name is Samuel Dockery. I'm here to see Rick Cross." Silence. Then, on your knees, hands behind your head. Samuel knelt. It took longer than it should have. His knees protested. Arthritis sang through the joints like broken glass. He laced his fingers behind his head and waited. 4 guards approached, young, professional. They moved in a tactical formation that told Samuel these weren't just hired guns. These were trained soldiers. Former special operations, probably. They patted him down, found the pistol, took it, found Bobby's letter, started to take it. "That's for Rick Cross," Samuel said, "from his father. Bobby Cross, Hill 875, 1967. The guard hesitated, looked at Samuel, really looked at him. "You're that Dockery, the sniper." "I was a sergeant a long time ago." "You got Bobby Cross killed." "No," Samuel said quietly, "but his son thinks I did. That's why I'm here, to tell him the truth." The guard studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Put the letter back in Samuel's pocket. We'll let the boss decide what to do with you." They zip-tied his hands. Not tight enough to cut circulation, but tight enough he couldn't slip them. Professional. They knew what they were doing. They marched him through the gate, past buildings that looked military-industrial, past men who stopped to stare. The old man who'd walked out of the mountains. The ghost from their boss's past. The command building was concrete and steel. Cold War architecture. Built to survive the end of the world. They took Samuel inside. Down a corridor lit by fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects, into an office that looked like it had been nice once and was now just worn. Rick Cross sat behind a desk, 45 years old, hard face, gray at the temples. He looked like his father. Same jaw, same eyes. Bobby would have been proud of the man his son became, right up until Rick decided to become this. Rick looked up, saw Samuel. His face went very still. "You," Rick said. His voice was controlled, tight, like he was holding back something that wanted to explode. "You've got a lot of nerve coming here. I came to talk, that's all." Talk. Rick stood, walked around the desk. He was tall, fit, moved like a fighter. "There's nothing to talk about. You killed my father. Left him to die in that crater while you saved yourself. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. The Army told my mother, told me. You abandoned your position. My father died because of your cowardice." "The Army lied," Samuel said. Rick hit him, fast, hard, a boxer's jab that snapped Samuel's head back and split his lip. Samuel tasted blood, didn't react, just stood there, took it. "You don't get to lie about my father," Rick said. "I'm not lying." Samuel worked his jaw. "Spat blood. Your father wrote you a letter. Before Hill 875. He asked me to give it to you if he didn't make it home. My father never wrote me a letter. The Army lost it, filed it wrong. It didn't surface until 2003. By then your mother was dead. I didn't know you existed until a few days ago." Samuel nodded toward his breast pocket. "It's there, read it." Rick stared at him, suspicious, angry, but also curious. The guards had stepped back, giving them space. This was between Rick and Samuel now, between a son and the man he thought killed his father. Rick reached into Samuel's pocket, pulled out the envelope, old, yellowed, the paper fragile with age. He opened it, read. Samuel watched his face, saw the anger fade, saw confusion take its place, saw the moment Rick realized everything he'd believed his whole life was a lie. Rick read the letter twice, then looked up at Samuel. His eyes were wet. "He didn't blame you," Rick whispered. "No, he said you were the best soldier he'd ever known. Your father was a good man. He died brave. died protecting his brothers. I held him when he went. I promised him his death mattered. I've spent 55 years trying to make good on that promise. Rick sat down hard, like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. The letter shook in his hands. My whole life, Rick said. My whole life I thought you were the villain. I built Black Ridge to finish what my father started, to fight the enemies he fought, to honor his sacrifice. By smuggling weapons, Samuel said quietly. Rick looked up. Sharp, you know about that. I know you've got 31 federal agents locked in your bunker. I know they were investigating weapons trafficking. I know you can't let them leave because they know too much. They would destroy everything, everything I built. Everything you built is a lie, Rick. Just like the lie about your father. You became what you thought you were fighting against. Rick stood, anger flooding back. You don't know anything about what I've built, about what I've done. I've kept this country safe. I've put weapons in the hands of people who fight our enemies. You've put weapons in the hands of warlords and criminals. You've made yourself rich selling death. That's not what your father died for. Don't you dare tell me what my father died for. Then read his letter again, Samuel said. Really read it. See what kind of man he was. See what he believed in, and ask yourself if he'd be proud of what you've become. Silence. Rick looked at the letter, looked at Samuel. The calculations happening behind his eyes were visible, trying to reconcile the truth with the lies, trying to figure out what to do now that his whole worldview had shattered. The door burst open. A man entered, younger than Rick, 30-ish, hard eyes. He wore tactical gear and carried himself like violence was a language he spoke fluently. Sir, the man said, we got a situation. Generators just went offline, and we're getting reports of movement on the western ridge. Rick turned. What kind of movement? Unknown. Could be wildlife, could be people. We're checking it out. Samuel smiled. The wolves were making their move. Rick saw the smile. Understanding dawned. You didn't come alone. I came to talk, Samuel said, but I brought insurance. Rick grabbed Samuel by the collar. How many? Enough. Enough for what? Enough to burn this whole place down if you don't let those hostages go. The man in tactical gear pulled his pistol, aimed it at Samuel's head. Say the word, boss. I'll drop him. Rick hesitated. Samuel could see him thinking, calculating, trying to decide if killing an old man was worth it, trying to decide if his whole empire was worth dying for. Then the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in after 3 seconds. Red lights. Dim. The whole building looked like the inside of a wound. Rick's radio crackled. Sir, this is Hess. We've got contact. Western Ridge. Looks like 5 or 6 hostiles. Armed. Professional movement. Engage them, Rick ordered. Sir, Hess said. These aren't normal hostiles. They're good. Really good. We've already lost 3 men. Samuel smiled wider. The wolves were hunting. Rick looked at Samuel. Called them off. Now, or I execute every hostage in this building. Can't call them off, Samuel said. They don't answer to me. They're old soldiers. Vietnam vets. They've been killing people since before your men were born, and they're here for one reason. To get those hostages out. Rick's hand went to his own pistol. Then I kill you. Kill me, and they'll kill everyone here. Let the hostages go and we all walk away. You're bluffing. Try me. Another explosion, distant but felt through the floor. That would be tiny, blowing something important. Rick's radio again. Sir, fuel depot's on fire. We've got casualties. These guys are everywhere and nowhere. We can't pin them down. The tactical advantage was shifting. Rick could feel it. His men were younger, better equipped, had superior numbers. But the wolves had surprise, had experience, had nothing to lose. All right, Rick said, let's end this. He grabbed Samuel, zip-tied hands and all, shoved him toward the door. You're going to call your people off, or I start shooting hostages in front of you. They went outside. The bunker complex was chaos. Men running, fires burning, gunfire echoing off the mountains. The smell of smoke and cordite hung in the air like memories. Rick dragged Samuel toward the hostage building. Guards flanked them, weapons ready. They moved fast. Professional, but scared, because somewhere in the darkness, old men were hunting them. The hostage building was concrete, windowless, a door that looked like it could stop a tank. Rick punched a code into a keypad. The lock disengaged with a heavy clunk. Inside was a large room, 31 people, zip-tied, sitting against walls. They looked up as Rick entered. Looked scared. Looked hopeless. Samuel scanned faces, found Maya. She was thinner than he remembered. Bruises on her face, but her eyes were sharp, alert. She saw him and her expression didn't change. Didn't give anything away. Professional. She'd been trained well. Rick grabbed one of the hostages at random, a young man, border patrol from the uniform, dragged him to his feet, put a gun to his head. "Everyone outside," Rick shouted into a radio. "I want all units in the compound, now, and I want whoever's attacking us to hear this." He waited. 60 seconds. Men came running from all directions, took positions, weapons aimed outward at the darkness. Rick keyed the radio again. "This is Rick Cross. I know you're out there. I know you're listening. Here's the deal. You've got 60 seconds to surrender or I start executing hostages. Starting now." Samuel looked at Maya, tried to communicate everything he couldn't say. "I'm sorry, I love you. I'm going to fix this." She looked back, and Samuel saw something in her eyes that made his heart stop. She wasn't scared. She was calculating, planning. His granddaughter was a fighter. 50 seconds, Rick announced. Movement in the darkness. Tracker appeared at the edge of the compound. Hands raised, rifle slung. He walked into the light. "One," Rick said. "Keep coming." Doc Jensen next. Then Preacher. Then Tiny. One by one, the wolves emerged from the darkness. Old men, exhausted, covered in soot and blood and the evidence of violence. 4, Rick counted. "Where are the others?" "Dead, probably," Samuel lied. "We're all that's left." Rick smiled. Didn't believe it, but couldn't prove otherwise. "On your knees, all of you." The wolves knelt, hands behind heads, the weight of their years visible in how carefully they moved, how much it cost them. Rick's men surrounded them, weapons aimed, one trigger pull, and the wolves would be dead. "You made a mistake coming here," Rick said. "All of you should have died years ago. Should have died in the jungle. Should have died in your sleep. But you didn't. So I'll finish what time couldn't." He raised his pistol, aimed at Tracker's head. "Wait," a voice called out. Everyone turned. A man stepped forward from the hostage group. 50-ish, Latino. He had the bearing of law enforcement, even with his hands zip-tied. "Agent Liam Torres," the man said. "FBI, I need to speak with you, Cross." Rick lowered the pistol, looked at Torres. "You're the one who's been investigating me. For 3 years." Torres nodded. 3 years deep cover. Watching you sell weapons to Russian oligarchs, Syrian warlords, Mexican cartels, building a case. "Good for you." Rick raised the pistol again. "Shame you won't live to testify." "There's copies," Torres said quickly. "Everything I found, every transaction, every name, it's all documented, uploaded to secure servers. If I don't check in every 48 hours, it all goes public. To the FBI, to Congress, to the press." "You're bluffing. Try me." Torres smiled. "It wasn't friendly. You kill us, you're done. You let us go, maybe you have time to run. Maybe you disappear before the hammer falls." Rick's hand trembled. Anger, frustration, the realization that he'd lost, that this whole empire he'd built was crumbling. Then his radio crackled again. This time a different voice. Confident, cold. "Cross," the voice said. "This is Hess. I'm at the armory. I've secured the location, and I'm taking command of this operation." Rick froze. "What?" "You're compromised," Hess said. "Soft, talking with the enemy. That letter broke you. I can see it. So I'm relieving you of command. Anyone who wants to get paid, follow my orders. Anyone loyal to Cross can die with him." On the radio, Samuel heard the sound of men choosing sides. Heard some acknowledge Hess. Heard others stay silent. Rick's organization was fracturing. A coup in real time. Rick's face went white. "Hess, stand down. That's an order." "I don't take orders from weak men," Hess replied. "And you're weak, Cross. Your daddy issues got in the way of business. That's unacceptable." Gunfire erupted, not directed at the wolves, directed at each other. Rick's men fighting Hess's men. Black Ridge Solutions tearing itself apart. In the chaos, Maya moved. Her hands were zip-tied, but her feet weren't. She kicked the guard nearest her, swept his legs, grabbed his rifle as he fell. Samuel moved too, rolled, came up behind Rick, used his bound hands like a club. Hit Rick in the back of the head. Rick went down. The wolves scattered, old men moving fast. Tracker grabbed a weapon. Tiny tackled a guard twice his size and beat him unconscious with his bare hands. Doc and Preacher got the hostages moving, out of the building, into the chaos. Samuel grabbed Rick, hauled him up. They were almost the same age, both old, both tired, both carrying 50 years of pain. "You need to run," Samuel said. "Hess will kill you." I know, Rick said. He looked lost. Everything I built, everything I thought I was a lie. But you can still do the right thing. Help us get these people out. Rick looked at Samuel, at the man he'd hated his whole life, at the man his father had trusted. Okay, Rick said. Okay. They moved together into the firefight. Hess's men were everywhere, 40 of them. Organized, professional. They'd been planning this coup, waiting for Rick to show weakness. The hostages ran, 31 people, stumbling, exhausted but running. The wolves covered them, old men with guns they barely had the strength to hold. Fighting, dying, buying time. Doc took a round to the shoulder. Went down. Preacher dragged him behind cover, applied pressure to the wound while bullets sparked off the concrete around them. Tiny charged a machine gun nest, got shot twice, kept charging, reached the position, killed both gunners with his bare hands. Collapsed. Tracker moved through the darkness like a ghost, killing, silent, efficient. The scout who'd learned 50 years ago how to move without being seen. And Samuel had his pistol back, 7 rounds. He made each one count, 7 shots, 7 men who'd made the mistake of getting between him and his granddaughter. Maya fought beside him. She'd gotten a rifle. She moved like he'd taught her. Professional, calm, deadly. Grandpa, she said during a lull, reloading. You're an idiot for coming here. Yeah, Samuel agreed. He was bleeding from somewhere. Couldn't tell where. Didn't matter. I know. I love you. Love you too, baby girl. Now shut up and shoot. They fought their way to the gate. The hostages were ahead, running into the darkness, into the mountains, towards safety. Behind them, the bunker complex burned. Hess's men and Rick's men killing each other. The whole criminal empire eating itself alive. The wolves were the last ones through the gate, covered in blood, wounded but alive. Except for Hank. Colonel Hank Reeves stood in the gateway, alone, M16 in his hands, firing controlled bursts at the pursuing Black Ridge soldiers. Hank, Samuel shouted, come on! Hank turned, smiled. Blood ran from his mouth. He'd been hit. Multiple times. The cancer hadn't killed him, but the bullets would. Go, Shepard, Hank said. Get them out. I'll buy you time. Number Samuel started back. Maya grabbed him. He's right, she said. We have to go. Now. Hank fired another burst. Men fell. He looked at Samuel one last time. It's been an honor, Shepard. Tell the wolves I said Semper Fi. Semper Fi, Samuel whispered. Hank turned back to the enemy. Kept firing. The last thing Samuel saw before Maya dragged him into the darkness was Hank charging. An old man with a rifle, dying of cancer, choosing how he went out, choosing to matter. The explosion came 30 seconds later. Hank had been carrying grenades. He'd gotten close enough to use them. The wolves ran. 31 hostages, 6 old men, 1 granddaughter. They ran through snow and darkness and cold that wanted to kill them. Behind them, the bunker complex burned like a funeral pyre. Ahead, the mountains waited, indifferent, eternal. Samuel ran with Maya beside him. His lungs burned. His legs screamed. He couldn't feel his hands. But he ran. Because Hank had bought them time. Had given his life to give them a chance. And Samuel would be damned if he wasted it. They ran for an hour, then 2. The adrenaline faded. The cold set in. People started falling. The hostages weren't in shape for this. Weeks of captivity had weakened them. Samuel called a halt. They were maybe 5 miles from the bunker. Far enough, maybe. Doc worked on the wounded. His own shoulder was bleeding, but he ignored it. Worked on others. Tiny was bad. 2 bullet wounds, chest and leg. Doc shook his head. Can't stop the bleeding, Doc said. He needs a hospital. Nearest hospital is 50 miles, Torres said. The FBI agent had proven useful. Organized the hostages. Kept them moving. He'll never make it. Tiny lay in the snow, breathing shallow. The big man who'd carried a machine gun through 3 tours, who'd blown up bridges and bunkers and anything that needed blowing. He was dying in the snow. Hey, Shepard, Tiny whispered. His voice was weak. We did good, right? Samuel knelt beside his friend, took his hand. We did great. Tell my grandkids I went out fighting, not in some hospital bed. Tell them Grandpa died being a badass. I'll tell them. Tiny smiled, closed his eyes, stopped breathing. Samuel sat there, holding his friend's hand, feeling the cold seep into his own bones, feeling 72 years of accumulated losses pile up. We need to move, Maya said gently. More will be coming. Samuel stood, left Tiny in the snow. There wasn't time for burial, wasn't time for grief. That would come later, if they survived. They moved again, slower now. People were beyond exhausted, beyond cold, moving on pure survival instinct. Tracker scouted ahead, found a cave system, big enough for everyone, hidden, defensible. They made it inside just as the sun rose. 31 hostages, 4 old men, 1 granddaughter. They collapsed in the cave, shivering, bleeding, alive. Samuel did a head count. Hank dead, Tiny dead, Doc wounded. Preacher had taken a graze across his ribs. Ironside was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Ironside?" Samuel asked. Tracker shook his head. "Last saw him setting up the M60, covering our retreat. He did not follow." Another one gone, another brother left behind. Samuel sat against the cave wall. Let the exhaustion take him. Maya sat beside him, leaned against his shoulder. "You came for me," she said. "Of course I came. You're 72 years old. You could have died." "Could have," Samuel agreed. "Didn't." "Why?" "We haven't talked in months. I thought you didn't care anymore." Samuel looked at his granddaughter, saw her mother in her eyes, saw himself in her determination, saw everything good in the world sitting next to him covered in blood and snow. "I've lost everyone," Samuel said quietly. "Your grandmother, your father. I pushed you away because I was scared to lose you too. But I realized something. Pushing you away was losing you anyway. So I came. Because you're my granddaughter. Because I love you. Because that's what family does." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "Grandpa," Samuel held her. Let her cry. Let himself cry. 2 soldiers. 2 generations. Both broken. Both surviving. Around them, the hostages huddled for warmth. Torres was organizing them, getting names, making sure everyone was accounted for. "We need to call for extraction," Torres said. "I've got a sat phone. Battery's low, but I can get 1 message out." Samuel nodded. "Do it. Get these people home." Torres made the call, spoke quickly, gave coordinates, hung up. "Chopper's in 6 hours," Torres said. "But there's a problem." "Always is," Samuel replied. "What?" "Hess is still out there, with 40 men. They know roughly where we are. They'll be hunting us. We need to stay hidden until extraction arrives." "Can we?" Samuel asked. Torres looked around the cave. At the wounded, at the exhausted, at people who'd given everything and had nothing left. "I don't know," Torres admitted. "Then we make it 6 hours," Samuel said. "Whatever it takes. We've come this far. We don't quit now." The waiting was the hardest part. Harder than the fighting. Harder than the running, just sitting, listening to the wind, wondering if every sound was Hess coming to finish what he'd started. Doc worked on the wounded, saved 3 lives, lost 1, a border patrol agent who'd been shot during the escape. Internal bleeding. Nothing Doc could do in a cave with limited supplies. They laid him in the back of the cave, said words over him. Preacher led the prayer, short, simple, the kind of words you say for soldiers who died doing their duty. Samuel dozed, woke, dozed again. His body demanded rest, but his mind wouldn't allow it. Too many threats, too many variables. Maya stayed close, rifle in her hands, watching the cave entrance. She'd become what he'd trained her to be. A soldier, a protector, someone who stood between evil and the innocent. He'd never been more proud. 4 hours passed, then 5. At hour 5.5, they heard it. Helicopters, distant but getting closer. "That's ours," Torres said. He'd been monitoring the sat phone. "They're early." Samuel stood, gathered people. "Get ready to move. When those birds land, we load fast." No hesitation. The helicopters came in low, 2 Blackhawks, door gunners scanning for threats. They landed in a clearing 50 meters from the cave. The wolves covered the hostages, moving them from cave to choppers, wounded first, then the others. Samuel was the last one out of the cave. Looked back at the darkness, at Tiny's body somewhere in the snow, at Hank's sacrifice, at Ironside's last stand. "Come on, Grandpa," Maya called from the helicopter. "Let's go home." Samuel ran, old man running, knees screaming, lungs burning, ran to the helicopter, climbed aboard. The bird lifted, turned, headed south, away from the bunker, away from the mountains, away from the last mission of the wolves. Samuel looked down, saw the bunker complex burning, saw tiny figures moving through the smoke. Hess's men probably, searching for them. Too late. He looked at the survivors, 30 people who'd been dead and now were alive, because 7 old men had decided it was worth dying for. 3 of those old men hadn't made it. Hank, Tiny, Ironside, but 31 had. Fair trade, Samuel thought. Fair trade. The helicopter flew it to the morning sun, carrying the living home, leaving the dead behind. Samuel closed his eyes, felt Maya's hand in his, felt the weight lift just a little. They'd done it. Against all odds, against all reason, 7 old men had walked into hell and pulled 31 people out. The mission was over. The war was won. And Samuel Dockery, 72 years old, could finally rest. The hospital in Kalispell smelled like disinfectant and old coffee and the particular sterile sadness of places where people went to heal or die. Samuel sat in a bed that was too soft, wearing a gown that was too thin, connected to machines that beeped in rhythms he didn't understand. 3 cracked ribs, frostbite on his toes and fingers, dehydration, exhaustion so profound the doctor said his body had started eating itself for fuel. They wanted to keep him for observation, wanted to run tests, wanted to understand how a 72-year-old man had survived what should have killed him. Samuel wanted to leave, but Maya stood at the door like a sentry, and every time he tried to get up, she gave him a look that reminded him exactly whose granddaughter she was. "You're staying," she said. It wasn't a suggestion. "I'm fine. You collapsed getting off the helicopter. They had to carry you in here on a stretcher. Minor setback. Grandpa." Maya's voice softened. "You almost died multiple times. Your body needs rest. So rest." Samuel looked at his granddaughter. She was in the next bed over, her own injuries being tended. Bruised ribs, cuts, malnutrition from 2 weeks of captivity, but alive, whole, safe. That was worth 3 cracked ribs and frostbite. "How are the others?" Samuel asked. Maya consulted a chart the nurses had given her. Doc's in surgery. Bullet went clean through his shoulder but nicked an artery. They're fixing it now. Preacher's got a concussion and broken fingers. Tracker's the healthiest of all of you, which is saying something, considering he's 70. And the hostages, 30 survivors out of 31. Most are stable. Some need surgery. A few need long-term care. But they're alive. Maya paused. "We got them out, Grandpa. We actually did it." "Hank got them out," Samuel said quietly. "Tiny, Ironside, they're the heroes. We're just the ones who survived." "You're all heroes." Maya sat on the edge of his bed, took his hand. Her hands were smaller than his, but just as scarred. "You came for me. You and 5 old men walked into hell because I was there. That's heroic. That's family." They sat in silence. The machines beeped. Outside the window, snow fell. Montana in January, cold and beautiful and indifferent to human suffering. The FBI came first. 2 agents in suits that looked expensive. They had badges and questions and the kind of professional courtesy that masked suspicion. "Agent Torres vouched for you," the senior agent said. His name was Mackenzie, 50-something, hard eyes. "He says you and your team conducted an unauthorized rescue operation, saved 31 federal agents, killed approximately 40 hostile contractors." "Sounds about right," Samuel said. "You're aware that vigilante action is illegal, that you had no authority to conduct military operations on U.S. soil. I'm aware that 31 people were going to die and nobody else was coming to save them. The Pentagon had assets in position. The Pentagon was going to let them die. We both know it. Election year, bad optics, easier to classify it and move on." Mackenzie studied him. "You're a Vietnam veteran, decorated, clean record until this week. Why throw that away?" "Because my granddaughter was in that bunker. Because those were federal agents being tortured by criminals. Because someone had to do something." Samuel met the agent's eyes. "You going to arrest me?" Mackenzie glanced at his partner, then back at Samuel. "Agent Torres says Rick Cross gave you a letter from his father. Can we see it? It's evidence in a 55-year-old cover-up. Army lied about what happened at Hill 875. Blamed me for an intelligence failure that got 7 men killed. That letter proves it. We'd still like to see it." Samuel pointed to the closet where they'd stored his belongings. Bloody clothes, broken rifle, Bobby's letter in a plastic evidence bag. Mackenzie read it. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. "This is going to cause problems. Army doesn't like admitting mistakes." "The Army can deal with it," Samuel said. "Those 7 men deserve the truth. Bobby Cross deserves his son, knowing he didn't die because of cowardice." Mackenzie folded the letter carefully. "Put it back. We'll need your full statement. Everything that happened. Names, dates, actions taken. When you're cleared by the doctors. We're not monsters, Mr. Dockery. We can wait a few days. They left. Maya waited until they were gone before speaking. Are they going to arrest you? Probably not, Samuel said. Torres has evidence on the weapon smuggling. Black Ridge Solutions was running guns to Russian oligarchs, Syrian warlords, Mexican cartels. The FBI's been investigating for 3 years. They'll want to close that case more than they want to prosecute an old man for saving federal agents. What about Rick Cross? What about him? Is he alive? Don't know. Last I saw, his own men were trying to kill him. He might have escaped, might have died. Either way, his empire is finished. Samuel closed his eyes, tried to rest, but every time he did, he saw faces. Hank charging into gunfire, Tiny bleeding in the snow, Ironside manning the M60, buying them time. The dead never let you rest. They just kept watching, kept judging, kept asking if their deaths had mattered. Doc came out of surgery 6 hours later, pale, weak, but alive. The bullet had done damage, but the surgeons had repaired it. He'd regained full use of his arm eventually. For now, he was on painkillers and bed rest. Preacher sat with him. The minister's hands were splinted. 3 broken fingers from when he'd punched a Black Ridge contractor hard enough to shatter bone. He prayed quietly, old words, familiar rhythms, asking God to make sense of violence and loss and old men dying for young men's mistakes. Tracker visited Samuel's room that evening. The small Vietnamese man looked tired but whole. He'd come through the mission with minor cuts and bruises. 70 years old and still as tough as the jungle that had tried to kill him 50 years ago. They did not find Ironside, Tracker said without preamble. Search and rescue looked. No body, no trace. He's dead, Samuel said. Had to be. No one could survive out there wounded. Maybe. Tracker sat in the visitor's chair. Or maybe he is like us, too stubborn to die. I choose to believe he made it, found shelter, waiting for spring to walk out. That's a nice thought. Sometimes nice thoughts are all we have. Tracker looked out the window, at the snow, at the mountains that had taken 3 of their brothers. Hank chose his death. Tiny died fighting. If Ironside is gone, he died protecting. These are good deaths, honorable deaths. Doesn't make them hurt less. No, Tracker agreed, but it makes them meaningful. And meaning is what we fight for. Not victory, not glory, just meaning. The funerals came 3 days later. Hank's body had been recovered from the bunker complex, what was left of it. The grenades had done their work. They shipped him to Arlington National Cemetery, full military honors, the kind of funeral reserved for heroes. Samuel wasn't allowed to attend, still under medical observation. But Maya went, represented the family. She came back with stories of a 21-gun salute, a folded flag, a bugler playing taps while snow fell on rows of white headstones. Hank would have hated the pageantry, Maya said, but he would have loved knowing he went out mattering. Tiny's body was found 4 days after the rescue, frozen in the snow where he'd died. They shipped him home to Texas. His family buried him in a small cemetery outside Houston. Samuel sent flowers, sent a letter to Tiny's grandchildren explaining how brave their grandfather had been, how he'd died saving lives, how he'd been a warrior until the very end. Ironside remained missing, presumed dead. His wife held a memorial service in Michigan. Empty casket, full church. People who'd known him came to pay respects, to remember a factory worker who'd also been a soldier, who'd fought Parkinson's and age and his own body's betrayal to do one last good thing. Samuel sent a letter to Ironside's wife, told her that her husband had died a hero, that his last act had saved 31 lives, that he'd chosen courage over comfort and had made the hardest choice any soldier could make. She wrote back, short note, thanking him, saying she'd always known her husband was special, that she was proud of him, that she missed him. Samuel kept the letter, added it to the weight of grief he carried. On the 5th day, the doctors cleared Samuel for discharge. He could barely walk. His ribs screamed with every breath. His frostbitten fingers throbbed, but he could leave. Maya drove him to a hotel, small place on the edge of Kalispell. She'd rented 2 rooms, got him settled, made sure he ate, made sure he took his medication, fussed over him like he was made of glass. I can take care of myself, Samuel protested. Clearly, Maya said, looking at his bandaged hands and hobbling walk. You're doing great. I survived. Barely. She sat on the edge of his bed, serious now. Grandpa, you could have died. Should have died. Why did you really come? Samuel looked at his granddaughter, saw her mother in her face, saw strength and fear and love all mixed together. Because I already lost your grandmother, he said quietly. Lost your father. I pushed you away after Daniel died because I couldn't stand the thought of losing you too. But pushing you away was losing you anyway. So when Hank called, when he said you were in danger, I realized I'd rather die trying to save you than live knowing I didn't try. Maya's eyes filled with tears. You're an idiot. Yeah, a stubborn, crazy, heroic idiot. That too. She hugged him, careful of his ribs. He held her and felt 50 years of walls crumble, felt the grief he'd been carrying start to ease just a little. I love you, Grandpa, Maya whispered. Love you too, baby girl. The congressional hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Time for Samuel to heal. Time for the FBI to build their case. Time for the media storm to reach hurricane force. The story had broken 2 days after the rescue. Unnamed sources leaked it to the press. 31 federal agents rescued by elderly Vietnam veterans. Weapons smuggling ring exposed. Private military company in shambles. 3 heroes dead. The news called Samuel and the Wolves everything from patriots to vigilantes to reckless old men who'd gotten lucky. The internet made them memes, made them legends, made them symbols of a generation that refused to quit. Samuel ignored all of it, stayed in his hotel room, healed, prepared for what came next. The hearing was in Washington, D.C., Senate Armed Services Committee. They flew Samuel first class, put him up in a nice hotel, treated him like a dignitary instead of a man who'd broken half a dozen laws. Maya came with him, so did Doc and Preacher and Tracker. The surviving wolves, they wore their best clothes, old suits that smelled like mothballs, ties that were decades out of style, but they wore them with dignity. The hearing room was packed. Senators on a raised platform, cameras everywhere, press in the gallery, families of the rescued hostages. It felt like being on trial. Senator Patricia Morales chaired the committee, 60-something, Latina, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd been a prosecutor before politics and it showed. Mr. Dockery, she began, you and your associates conducted an unauthorized military operation on U.S. soil. You killed approximately 40 people. You destroyed millions of dollars in property. Do you dispute any of these facts? No, ma'am, Samuel said. His voice was steady despite the nerves. All true. You had no authority to conduct such an operation. No, ma'am. You endangered your team, most of whom were over 70 years old. They volunteered. We all knew the risks. 3 of your team died. Colonel Hank Reeves, Thomas Robinson, Stanley Kowalski. Do you feel responsible for their deaths? Samuel took a breath. Let it out slow. Yes, ma'am. I feel responsible. I'll feel responsible until the day I die. But I'll tell you something. Each of those men chose to be there, chose to fight, chose to die if it meant saving lives. They made that choice as free men, as soldiers, as heroes. I'm not going to dishonor their sacrifice by second-guessing it. The room was silent. Cameras clicked. Senator Morales made notes. Another senator spoke up. Senator Jackson, older, conservative. He looked skeptical. Mr. Dockery, you claimed the Pentagon was going to abandon those agents. Do you have proof? I have the fact that they were in captivity for 2 weeks and no rescue came. I have Colonel Reeves's testimony that he was told no assets were available. I have common sense that says if they were planning a rescue, they would have done it before we did. The Pentagon denies this, Jackson said. The Pentagon denies a lot of things. Doesn't make them true. Agent Torres testified next, laid out 3 years of investigation, showed evidence of weapons smuggling, bank transfers, shell companies, a criminal enterprise worth hundreds of millions. Black Ridge Solutions was selling weapons to anyone who'd pay, Torres said. Russian oligarchs, Syrian warlords, Mexican cartels. They weren't patriots, they were war profiteers, and when we got close to exposing them, they tried to kill us. If Mr. Dockery and his team hadn't intervened, 31 federal agents would be dead. Do you believe their actions were justified? Senator Morales asked. Torres didn't hesitate. Yes, absolutely, they saved my life, saved all our lives. If that's vigilantism, then I'm grateful for vigilantes. The families testified, parents of rescued agents, spouses, children. One by one they stood and thanked Samuel, thanked the wolves, said their loved ones were alive because old men had decided some things were worth dying for. Samuel sat through it all, uncomfortable. These people were treating him like a hero. He didn't feel like a hero. Heroes didn't leave bodies in the snow. Heroes didn't watch friends die. Heroes came home whole. But he sat. He listened. He accepted their gratitude because refusing it would dishonor what Hank and Tiny and Ironside had given. The vote came at the end of the second day. The committee voted 8-5, no criminal charges, self-defense, defense of others, extraordinary circumstances. The legal equivalent of a shrug and a thanks for your service. Samuel was free. Outside the hearing room, reporters swarmed. Cameras, microphones, questions shouted over each other. How does it feel to be called a hero? Do you regret the deaths of your team? Would you do it again? Samuel pushed through. Maya ran interference. The other wolves formed a protective barrier. Old men shuffling through chaos. Finally, they made it to a car, doors closed, silence. That was hell, Preacher said. Better than the actual hell we walked through, Doc replied. They drove to Arlington, to the National Cemetery where Hank was buried. Row upon row of white headstones, thousands of them, soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines, the honored dead. Hank's grave was fresh, the earth still dark, the headstone simple. Name, rank, dates. No mention of how he died, just that he had. Samuel stood at the grave. The other wolves flanked him, 4 old men paying respects to a 5th. You did good, Colonel, Samuel said. Bought us time, saved lives, died the way you wanted. Can't ask for more than that. The wind blew cold across the cemetery. Winter in D.C., not as harsh as Montana, but still bitter, still hard. Tracker placed a small stone on the headstone. Vietnamese tradition, letting the dead know they were remembered. Doc saluted, sharp, professional, the kind of salute you gave a superior officer. Preacher prayed, asked God to take care of their brother, to give him rest, to remember his sacrifice. Samuel just stood there, looking at the name, remembering the man, the soldier, the friend. Semper Fi, Samuel whispered, always faithful. They left Arlington as the sun set, drove to a bar that catered to veterans. Quiet place, dark wood, American flag on the wall, photos of soldiers who'd never come home. They drank, not to celebrate, to remember, to mourn, to acknowledge that they'd survived when better men hadn't. To the wolves, Doc raised his glass. To the wolves, they echoed. They drank. The whiskey burned, tasted like smoke and regret and the particular bitterness of victory that cost too much. A man approached their table, 50-ish, suit and tie. He moved with military bearing, looked familiar, but Samuel couldn't place him. Mr. Dockery, the man said, I'm Rick Cross. Samuel tensed, reached for a weapon he wasn't carrying. The other wolves shifted, ready for violence. Rick raised his hands. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to talk, to apologize, to thank you. Samuel studied him. Rick looked different than he had in Montana. Thinner, older, haunted. A man who'd lost everything and was trying to figure out what came next. Sit, Samuel said. Rick sat, ordered whiskey, waited until it arrived before speaking. I've been in FBI custody, Rick said. Protective custody. Hess and what's left of his men want me dead. Oh, me then. So do the Russians. So do half a dozen other groups I sold weapons to. I'm testifying against all of them, giving the FBI everything. Why? Because you were right. My father wouldn't be proud of what I became. I built an empire on lies and blood and justified it by telling myself I was honoring him. But I wasn't. I was dishonoring everything he stood for. Rick pulled out Bobby's letter, worn now, creased from being read too many times. This letter saved me, Rick said. Knowing the truth, knowing my father didn't blame you, didn't die because of cowardice. He died doing his duty, fighting beside good men. That matters. He died brave, Samuel said, held on longer than anyone should have been able to. Last thing he asked me was to tell you his death mattered. I'm telling you now. It mattered. Rick's eyes were wet. Thank you for telling me, for coming to get me, for not letting Hess kill me. You could have left me there. Could have. Didn't. Why? Because you're Bobby's son. That makes you family. And family doesn't leave family behind. They drank in silence. 2 men, 2 generations, connected by a third man who died 55 years ago in a jungle on the other side of the world. What happens to you now? Samuel asked. Prison, probably. 10 to 15 years if I cooperate fully. FBI eyes offering witness protection after I serve my time. New identity, new life. Start over. Sounds lonely. It is, Rick finished his whiskey. But it's better than I deserve. And maybe it's a chance to do something right. To be the man my father thought he was raising. He stood, extended his hand. Samuel took it. They shook. Not friends, but not enemies either. Something harder to define. Thank you, Mr. Dockery, Rick said, for everything. He left, disappeared into the night, into whatever future waited for a man trying to atone for a lifetime of mistakes. The wolves sat in silence, processing, absorbing. Think he means it, Doc asked, about changing. Maybe, Samuel said. People can change if they want it bad enough, if they're willing to do the work. You changed, Tracker observed. After the war, you were angry, broken, but you healed, built a life. Took 50 years, Samuel replied, and I'm still working on it. They finished their drinks, paid, left the bar, and walked into the cold that night. Tomorrow, they'd go home, back to their lives, back to being old men instead of soldiers. But tonight, they were still the wolves, still brothers, still carrying the weight of what they'd done. Samuel's phone buzzed. Text from Maya. She'd stayed at the hotel, wanted to give him space. The text was simple. Love you, Grandpa. Proud of you. See you tomorrow. Samuel smiled, texted back. Love you too, baby girl. They walked through the city. 4 old men, survivors, heroes whether they wanted the title or not. The streets were quiet, most people asleep, living normal lives, unaware that men like these had kept them safe, had fought wars, had sacrificed everything so others could sleep soundly. At the hotel, they said goodnight, shook hands, embraced, the kind of goodbye soldiers give when they don't know if they'll see each other again. Samuel went to his room, sat on the bed, looked at his hands, bandaged, scarred, shaking slightly from arthritis and age and accumulated trauma. These hands had killed men, had saved lives, had held his wife's hand as she died, had taught his son and granddaughter to shoot, had carried friends who'd been wounded, had folded flags for families who'd lost everything. These hands told a story of 72 years. Not all of it good, not all of it bad, just human, just real. Samuel lay back, closed his eyes. For the first time in weeks, the nightmares didn't come. Bobby Cross didn't haunt him. The crater on Hill 875 stayed in the past where it belonged. Instead, he dreamed of Martha, of Daniel, of Hank and Tiny and Ironside. They weren't dying in his dreams. They were whole, smiling, at peace. And Maya was there, alive, safe, the granddaughter he'd almost lost and found again. In the dream, Bobby Cross appeared, young, whole, the way he'd looked before the bullets and the blood. You did good, Shepherd, Bobby said. You kept your promise. My death mattered. My son knows the truth. That's all I ever wanted. Samuel wanted to say something, wanted to apologize, wanted to explain 55 years of guilt and grief. But Bobby just smiled, turned, walked into light that was warm and forgiving. Rest now, Bobby's voice echoed. You've earned it. Samuel woke to sunlight streaming through the hotel window. His body hurt. Everything hurt. But it was a clean hurt. The hurt of healing instead of breaking. He got up, slowly, carefully, looked at himself in the mirror. An old man looked back, scarred, worn, but still standing. Still here. His phone rang. Maya. Morning, Grandpa. You ready to go home? Samuel looked around the hotel room, thought about West Virginia, about his cabin in the mountains, about 40 acres of peace and quiet and the long, slow rest he'd earned. Yeah, he said, I'm ready. Good, because I'm coming with you. Taking some leave, figured we could spend time together. Talk, heal, be family. I'd like that, Samuel said. His voice caught. I'd like that a lot. See you in an hour. Love you. Love you too. Samuel packed his bag, not much. Clothes, medication, Bobby's letter, which the FBI had returned. That was all he needed. He met the wolves in the lobby. They looked like he felt, tired, hurting, but alive. Grateful for sunrise and coffee and the simple fact of breathing. Where are you heading, Samuel asked. Doc, Oregon, back to my clinic. Animals need me. Preacher. Alabama, got a sermon to write about sacrifice and meaning and old men who refuse to quit. Tracker, California, going to teach my grandchildren tracking. Pass down what I know before I forget. And you, Shepherd, Tracker asked. What comes next? Samuel thought about it, about Maya coming home with him, about the cabin, about the possibility of peace after 50 years of war. Going to rest, Samuel said. Going to heal. Going to be a grandfather instead of a soldier for a while. See how that feels. Sounds good, Doc said. Sounds earned, Preacher added. They shook hands, embraced, said goodbye without saying goodbye because soldiers never really parted. They just went to different foxholes and waited for the next mission. Samuel and Maya flew home together. She slept on his shoulder, exhausted, safe. Samuel watched her sleep and felt something in his chest that had been clenched for years finally relax. He'd failed Bobby, failed Daniel, failed Hank and Tiny and Ironside. But he hadn't failed Maya. That would have to be enough. The plane touched down in Charleston. They rented a car, drove north into the West Virginia mountains. The roads were familiar, every turn a memory, every mile bringing him closer to home. The cabin looked the same. 40 acres, pine trees, snow on the ground. Smoke should have been coming from the chimney, but wasn't. The place had been empty for 3 weeks. They went inside, cold, dark, but still home. Maya started a fire. Samuel made coffee. They sat together in the warmth and watched the flames and didn't talk. Didn't need to. Just being together was enough. That night, Samuel stood on his porch and looked at the stars. The same stars that had watched him in the jungles. The same stars that had watched him in Montana. Indifferent, eternal. Somewhere up there, Hank and Tiny and Ironside were watching too. Bobby Cross, Daniel, Martha, all the ghosts he'd accumulated over 72 years. He raised his coffee mug, a toast to the dead. "You were right, Hank," Samuel said to the night, to the stars, to the ghosts. "It was better to die mattering than to die in a hospital bed. You showed me that, reminded me why we fought, why we keep fighting." The wind blew cold through the pines. It almost sounded like voices, like his old friends answering. Samuel smiled, went inside, closed the door on the cold and the dark and the ghosts. Inside, Maya was asleep by the fire. His granddaughter, his family, his reason for everything. Samuel covered her with a blanket, sat in his chair, let the warmth seep into his bone. The mission was over. The war was won. The dead were honored. The living were safe. For the first time in 55 years, Samuel Dockery felt like he could rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new pain, new ghosts probably. But tonight, he was just an old man in his cabin, warm and safe and grateful to be alive. The last shepherd, watching over his flock. Even now, even at the end, especially at the end, spring came to West Virginia like a promise kept. The snow melted, the creeks ran high and fast. Green pushed through brown earth, and the mountains remembered what it felt like to be alive instead of frozen. Samuel stood on his porch and watched the world wake up. 3 months since Montana. 3 months since he'd walked into hell and somehow walked back out. His ribs had healed. The frostbite had faded. His hands still shook, but that was arthritis, not trauma. Age, not war. He was 73 now. Birthday had come and gone in February while he was still learning to walk without wincing. Maya had made him a cake. They'd eaten it by the fire and not talked about the fact that he was older than most men got to be. Older than Hank or Tiny or Ironside would ever be. Survivor's guilt was a weight you carried forever. You just learned to distribute the load. Maya was inside making breakfast. She'd taken 6 months leave from the army. Said she needed time to heal. Samuel suspected she just wanted to make sure he didn't die alone in his cabin. Either way, he was grateful for the company. The sound of a car engine broke the morning quiet. Unusual. Samuel's cabin was 40 acres of nowhere. You didn't stumble onto it by accident. He watched a black SUV navigate the dirt road. Government plates. His hand went to the pistol he'd started carrying again. Old habits. The SUV stopped. 2 men got out. Military, dress uniforms, medals that caught the morning sun. They moved with purpose toward the porch. "Master Sergeant Dockery," the senior officer said. He was a colonel, 50-ish. Had the look of a man who'd seen combat and come back different. "I'm Colonel Marcus Webb. This is Major Sarah Chen. We're here on behalf of the president." Samuel's hand moved away from the pistol. The president. Nothing good ever came from those words. "What does he want?" "To honor you." Webb held up a leather folder. "You've been awarded the Medal of Honor for actions in Montana, saving 31 federal agents. Extraordinary heroism in the face of overwhelming odds. The ceremony is next month. White House, full honors." Samuel stared at the folder like it might bite him. "I don't want a medal. With respect, Master Sergeant, this isn't about what you want. It's about what you did, what you earned, what the country owes you." "The country doesn't owe me anything. I did what needed doing, that's all." Major Chen spoke for the first time. Her voice was firm, but not unkind. "Hank Reeves is being awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. So is Thomas Robinson. So is Stanley Kowalski, though his body was never recovered. The ceremony honors all of you. Refusing would dishonor their sacrifice." Samuel felt the trap close. She was right. This wasn't about him. It was about the wolves. about making sure history remembered what they'd done. When? He asked quietly. May 15th. We'll arrange transportation, accommodations, everything you need. Fine, but I'm bringing you my granddaughter. Of course. Webb handed him the folder. There's more. The Army is also issuing a formal apology for the cover-up regarding Hill 875. Clearing your record, acknowledging that you were scapegoated for an intelligence failure. It's 60 years too late, but it's something. Samuel took the folder, felt the weight of it. 60 years. Bobby Cross had been dead 60 years and the truth was finally coming out. Better late than never, I suppose. The officers left. Samuel stood on the porch holding the folder. Maya came out, saw his face. What is it? He handed her the folder. She read. Her eyes went wide. Grandpa, this is the Medal of Honor. The highest military decoration. Do you know what this means? Means I have to wear a suit. Samuel's voice was dry. I hate suits. Maya laughed, then hugged him. I'm so proud of you. Proud of us. You were there too. You fought. You survived. We all did this together. But you led. You made it happen. She pulled back, looked at him seriously. You're a hero, Grandpa, whether you want to be or not. Heroes don't leave friends behind. Heroes bring everyone home. You brought 31 people home. That counts. Samuel thought about Hank charging into gunfire, about Tiny bleeding in the snow, about Ironside manning a machine gun while his hands shook and his body betrayed him. Not everyone, he said quietly. The White House in May was exactly as pretentious as Samuel expected. All marble and flags and uniforms so crisp they looked like they'd cut you if you got too close. He wore his dress uniform, Army Service blues. The medals he'd earned over 3 tours pinned to his chest. The uniform fit looser than it had 50 years ago. He'd shrunk, got old. But he wore it with dignity because Hank and Tiny and Ironside couldn't. Maya stood beside him in her own dress uniform. Captain's bars now. She'd been promoted. They'd made her an instructor at the Army's sniper school, teaching the next generation how to kill from a distance and live with it after. The ceremony was in the East Room, packed with people, senators, generals, press, the families of the rescued hostages, Doc and Preacher and Tracker, the surviving wolves, sitting together like they had in 100 briefing rooms across 50 years. The president entered. Everyone stood. Samuel had voted against this particular president, but that didn't matter now. The office mattered. The symbolism mattered. The president spoke. Words about heroism and sacrifice, and the debt the nation owed to its veterans. Standard political speech, but delivered with what seemed like genuine emotion. Then came the citations. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, Master Sergeant Samuel Dockery, while serving as team leader of a volunteer rescue force, did lead 7 men into hostile territory to rescue 31 federal agents held captive by numerically superior enemy forces. Despite being 72 years of age and facing overwhelming odds, Master Sergeant Dockery displayed extraordinary heroism, tactical brilliance, and selfless dedication to his fellow Americans. His actions resulted in the successful rescue of all surviving hostages and the neutralization of a significant threat to national security. His gallantry reflects the highest traditions of military service and brings great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. The president placed the medal around Samuel's neck. The ribbon felt heavy, heavier than it should, like it carried the weight of everyone who hadn't come home. Hank's family accepted his medal, his daughter, grandchildren. They cried. The president said words about sacrifice and honor. Said Hank had died a hero. Samuel agreed. Hank had died exactly the way he wanted. Fighting, mattering, choosing his own end. Tiny's family came next. His wife, his children and grandchildren. The president spoke about courage and determination, about a man who'd given everything in service of others. Then came Ironside's family. His wife walked slowly to the stage, accepted the medal for a husband whose body had never been found, whose fate remained unknown. She held the medal and wept, and the whole room felt it. The ceremony ended. Photos were taken, hands were shaken. The rescued hostages formed a line to thank Samuel personally, to tell him how grateful they were, how their children still had parents because of him. Samuel accepted their thanks but felt like a fraud. He'd just been trying to save Maya. The others had been there, had been collateral salvation. Afterwards, in a private room, the families of the wolves gathered with the survivors. Hank's daughter approached Samuel. She was 60, had her father's eyes. He talked about you, she said, in his letters, called you the best soldier he ever knew. Said if he ever had to walk into hell, he'd want you beside him. He was a good man, a good commander, a good friend. I'm sorry I couldn't bring him home. He came home. She touched the medal around Samuel's neck. He came home in this, in the mission, in what he accomplished. That's enough. Tiny's widow was next, older, tired, but with steel in her spine. My husband loved you boys, she said. The wolves, you were his real family. I want you to know he was happy at the end, doing what he loved, being who he was. That's a gift. Thank you, Samuel said, for sharing him with us, for understanding. Ironside's wife sat alone in a corner. Samuel approached carefully. She looked up. Her eyes were red. They never found him, she said. No body, no closure, just gone. He died protecting others. Buying time, that's who he was. I know. She clutched the medal. But I keep hoping he's out there. Hurt maybe. Lost. Waiting for someone to find him. Samuel knelt beside her. The movement hurt his knees, but he did it anyway. Ma'am, if there was any chance Stan was alive, I'd be out there looking. But winter in those mountains. Wounded. Alone. Nobody survives that. She nodded. Wiped her eyes. I know. I miss him. So do I, Samuel said. Every day. The reception lasted hours. Too many people. Too much noise. Samuel escaped to a balcony, stood in the evening air, and tried to breathe. Tracker found him. The small Vietnamese man appeared like a ghost. Old habits. Too many people, Tracker observed. Always hated crowds. Me too. Tracker leaned against the railing. We are old men now, Shepherd. Soon we will all be gone. Who will remember us then? Our families. The people we saved. The soldiers we trained. Samuel looked at his friend. Memory doesn't die as long as someone carries it forward. Tracker smiled. Wise words. You should teach. I'm 73. Too old to teach. Never too old. Tracker pulled out a newspaper clipping, handed it to Samuel. Look, it was an article about a nonprofit opening in West Virginia, teaching wilderness survival and tactical skills to veterans. PTSD therapy through practical training. The founder's name made Samuel blink. Ironside's widow, Samuel said. His son, actually, Tracker corrected. But she supports. They want to honor his father, use his skills to help others. They asked if you would help. Me, you are the shepherd. You teach, you guide, you protect. It is what you do. Samuel studied the article, saw a photograph of Stan Kowalski in his prime. Young, strong, before the Parkinson's, before age. Just a soldier who knew how to fight and wanted to pass that knowledge forward. I'll think about it, Samuel said. Think fast. They want to open in June. 2 months later, Samuel stood in a clearing on his 40 acres and watched construction crews finish the last building. Dockery Tactical Academy, the sign read. Nonprofit wilderness survival and marksmanship training for veterans. It had been Maya's idea. Use the Medal of Honor publicity, the donations that poured in, build something that mattered. Something that honored the wolves by continuing their mission. Teaching, protecting, passing knowledge forward. The academy was simple. 4 buildings, barracks, classroom, range, medical facility, capacity for 40 students at a time. Completely free for veterans. Funded by donations and Samuel's speaking fees and the surprising amount of money people would pay to be trained by a Medal of Honor recipient. Samuel hated the speaking fees. Hated standing in front of crowds telling war stories. But the money helped veterans, so he did it. Suffered through Rotary Club dinners and veterans conventions and endless questions about what it felt like to kill someone. It felt necessary, he'd answer. And then it felt empty. And then you learned to live with it. The first class arrived in June, 40 veterans, ages ranging from 25 to 70. Different wars, different branches, different wounds, but all carrying the same weight. Samuel stood before them in the classroom. Behind him, photos of the wolves. Hank, Tiny, Ironside, Doc and Preacher and Tracker, who'd volunteered as instructors. You're here because something broke, Samuel began. War broke it, or trauma, or time. You're here because you're trying to find purpose again. Trying to remember who you were before the breaking. The students listened. Some looked skeptical. Some looked desperate. All looked lost. I can't fix you, Samuel continued. Nobody can fix you but you. But I can teach you skills, wilderness survival, marksmanship, tactics, And maybe while you're learning to hit a target at 1,000 yards, you'll remember something. You'll remember that you're capable, that you're strong, that the breaking didn't destroy you, it just changed you. A hand raised, young man, maybe 30, Iraq veteran from the look of him. Why should we listen to you, the young man asked. No disrespect, but you're old, war's changed. What you learned in Vietnam doesn't apply now. Samuel smiled. You're right, war has changed, technology changed it, tactics changed it. But the fundamentals never change. Fear, courage, brotherhood, sacrifice. Those are eternal. Those are what I teach. He walked to the window, pointed at the range. Tomorrow we start with the basics. Today you're going to tell me your story, who you are, what you've lost, what you're looking for. We do this as a group because you're not alone. None of us are alone. That's the first lesson. Remember it. They went around the room, one by one. Stories of combat and loss and trying to come home when home didn't feel like home anymore. A woman, Marine, Afghanistan, lost her legs to an IED, learned to walk again but couldn't find purpose. A man, Army, Iraq, watched his best friend die, blamed himself, couldn't sleep without seeing the blood. Another woman, Air Force, never saw combat but felt guilty for surviving when others didn't. Samuel listened, recognized himself in every story. The guilt, the loss, the searching for meaning in a world that had moved on while you stayed trapped in the past. When they finished, Samuel spoke quietly. I'm 73 years old. I fought in a war that ended 50 years ago. I've buried friends, buried family. I've killed men and saved men and failed men. And I'm still trying to figure out what it all means. So if you're looking for someone who has all the answers, you came to the wrong place. But if you want someone who understands the questions, who'll walk beside you while you find your own answers, then welcome. Welcome to the Wolves. Training started at dawn. Samuel pushed them, not because he was cruel, but because challenge gave purpose, because accomplishing hard things reminded you that you were capable of accomplishing hard things. They learned to navigate by stars and sun, to track through forest, to move silent, to shoot accurate at distances that seemed impossible. Doc taught field medicine, how to stop bleeding, how to stabilize injuries, how to save a life when hospitals were hours away. Preacher taught resilience, offered counseling, led group discussions about trauma and healing, and finding faith in something bigger than yourself. Tracker taught patience, showed them how to observe, how to see patterns, how to understand that rushing got you killed, but patience kept you breathing. And Samuel taught them to shoot. The fundamentals never change, he'd say. Breathing, trigger control, follow through. You master these, you master the rifle. You master the rifle, you master yourself. He'd demonstrate, set up at the 1,000-yard line, old man with shaking hands and eyes that needed glasses. He'd settle behind the rifle. The trembling would stop. His breathing would slow. He'd become what he'd always been. A predator, a protector, a shepherd. The rifle would crack. Downrange, the target would ring. Dead center. The students would stare. This old man who could barely walk without his knees creaking had just made a shot most of them couldn't make on their best day. Your turn, Samuel would say. Among the first class was a young woman, Jessica Harmon, 22, Rick Cross's daughter. She'd come with a letter of recommendation from her father, written from prison. He was serving 12 years for weapons trafficking, testifying against everyone he'd sold to, trying to atone. The letter explained that Jessica wanted to understand who her father had been, who her grandfather had been, wanted to learn from the man both of them had talked about. Samuel had accepted her without hesitation. She was a good student, focused, determined, carried her grandfather's letter in her breast pocket, the same letter Samuel had carried to Montana. One evening, after a day on the range, she approached him. My father writes about you, she said. Says you saved his life, not just in Montana, saved his soul by telling him the truth. Your grandfather was a good man. Your father's trying to be a good man. That's all any of us can do. Try. He wants to meet you. When he gets out, to thank you properly. He doesn't need to thank me. Just needs to keep walking the path he's on. Keep choosing to be better. Will you meet him? Please. It would mean everything. Samuel thought about Bobby dying in a crater, about Rick building an empire on lies, about the possibility of redemption. Yeah, he said, I'll meet him. 3 months into the first session, something impossible happened. A man walked out of the forest, tall, thin, bearded, moving slow but steady. He reached the academy fence just as Doc was doing morning rounds. Doc stared, dropped his medical bag, ran. "Stan," Doc shouted. "Stan Kowalski! Is that you?" The man looked up, smiled. His voice was rough, unused. "Hey, Doc, sorry I'm late." Ironside had survived. Barely. He'd been shot 3 times in the Montana firefight, crawled into a cave, passed out, woke up days later, infected, delirious. Should have died. Instead, he'd survived on melted snow and rage, and the same stubborn refusal to quit that had carried him through 72 years. When he could move, he'd started walking, south, away from the bunker, away from the search parties that had given up. Just walking, one step at a time, hands shaking from Parkinson's, body falling apart, but refusing to die. He'd spent 4 months in the wilderness, living off the land, trapping, foraging, surviving. By the time he reached civilization, he was 40 pounds lighter and looked like a corpse. But he was alive. The reunion was chaos, Doc crying, preacher praying, tracker laughing, Samuel standing there in shock. "You stubborn son of a bitch," Samuel said. "We buried you, had a funeral." "Heard about that," Ironside grinned. "How was it?" "Sad. Lots of crying." "Good. Glad I mattered." They got him to a hospital, treated his infections, fed him, ran tests. The doctors said it was a miracle he'd survived. Said most men would have died in the first week. Ironside said he'd been too pissed off to die. Had unfinished business. "What business?" Samuel asked. "Hadn't taught you young punks everything I know yet," Ironside replied. He joined the academy as an instructor, taught heavy weapons, taught perseverance, taught the most important lesson of all. You don't quit until you're dead, and sometimes not even then. The students loved him. This old man with shaking hands who'd survived the impossible, who'd walked out of winter and death and come back stronger. He became a symbol, proof that breaking didn't mean destroyed, that you could lose everything and still find a reason to keep going. 1 year after the first class, the academy graduated its first students, 40 veterans who'd arrived broken and left whole. Or at least closer to whole. Healing was a journey, not a destination. They stood in formation, received certificates, shook hands with instructors who'd become friends, became brothers and sisters. Samuel watched with pride. This was the mission, not killing, not fighting, teaching, protecting, passing forward the lessons paid for in blood and sacrifice. Maya stood beside him. She'd taken a permanent position as instructor, said the academy was more important than active duty, said teaching the next generation how to survive mattered more than deploying. "You did good, Grandpa," she said. "We did good. All of us. The wolves, you, these students. This is what it was all for." "What?" "Everything. The war, the fighting, the sacrifice. It was so we could stand here and teach others how to live, how to find purpose, how to matter." That evening, Samuel climbed to the highest point on his 40 acres, a ridge that overlooked the valley. He'd been coming here for 50 years, to think, to remember, to talk to ghosts. He carried his rifle, the M40 from the war, from Hill 875, from Montana, the weapon that had defined his life. Maya followed. She'd brought her own rifle, the one Samuel had given her. They sat together, grandfather and granddaughter, 2 generations of shepherds. "I'm getting old," Samuel said. 73 now. My hands shake worse every year. My eyes are going. Soon I won't be able to make the shots I used to make." "You made a 1,000-yard shot last week," Maya pointed out. "Took me 3 tries. Used to make it first time, every time." "So you're human. Welcome to the club." Samuel smiled, looked at his granddaughter, strong, capable. Everything he tried to teach her made real. "This rifle," he said, touching the M40, "it's been with me 56 years, saved my life more times than I can count. Took lives, too, more than I want to count. It's a tool, but it's also a symbol of duty, of sacrifice, of being the person who stands between evil and the innocent." "I know, Grandpa. I'm passing it to you. Officially, you're the shepherd now. You protect the flock. You teach the next generation. You carry forward what we started." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "Grandpa, I can't. This is yours." "Was mine. Now it's yours." Samuel handed her the rifle. "When you're my age, you'll pass it to someone who deserves it, and they'll pass it to someone else. And the mission continues." The shepherds keep watching, keep protecting. Maya took the rifle, held it carefully, like the sacred object it was. "What about you?" she asked. "What will you do?" "What I should have done years ago. Rest, heal, watch my granddaughter become the person I always knew she could be." Samuel looked at the sunset, watched the light paint the mountains gold and red and purple. "I fought long enough. Now it's your turn." They sat in silence, watching the sun set, watching the world turn, watching the eternal cycle of old giving way to new. In the valley below, the academy was lit up, students and instructors gathering for dinner, sharing stories, building bonds, becoming family. This was the mission. This was what mattered. Not the medals or the glory. Not even the lives saved, though those mattered too. It was this: passing forward, teaching, making sure the next generation was ready for whatever came. Samuel thought about Hank, about Tiny, about Ironside walking out of death itself, about Bobby Cross dying in a jungle crater 60 years ago, and his sacrifice rippling forward through time until it became this: an academy, a family, a mission. Bobby's death had mattered. Daniel's death had mattered. Hank and Tiny and all the others. They'd mattered because they'd taught, protected, sacrificed so others could live. And now Samuel was passing that forward, giving Maya the rifle, the responsibility, the burden, and the honor of being a shepherd. The sun touched the horizon, the sky burned. "You ready for this?" Samuel asked. "No," Maya admitted. "But neither were you at my age. You figured it out. So will I." "That's my girl." They stood, started down the mountain, the rifle in Maya's hands now, the old shepherd and the new, walking side by side into whatever came next. Behind them, the sun set on another day, another mission, another chapter. Ahead, the academy waited, students who needed teaching, veterans who needed purpose, a mission that would never truly end as long as someone carried it forward. Samuel Dockery was 73 years old. He'd fought in wars, lost friends, buried family, killed men, saved men, failed men, succeeded. And now finally he could rest. Because the watch didn't end. It just passed to someone new. The shepherd was retiring, but there would always be shepherds. Always someone standing guard. Always someone willing to walk into the darkness so others could sleep safely. Always someone carrying the rifle. Maya led the way down the mountain. Samuel followed. His knees hurt. His back hurt. Everything hurt. But his heart felt light. The mission was complete. The rifle was passed. The next generation was ready. And Samuel Dockery, for the first time in 56 years, could lay down his burden, could finally truly rest. The last shepherd, watching one more sunset, content, at peace. His war was over. His granddaughter's was just beginning. And that, he realized, was exactly how it should be. The old give way to the new. The broken teach the healing. The shepherds pass the watch. And the mission continues. Forever. As long as there are people worth protecting. As long as there are wolves willing to stand guard. Samuel reached the valley, looked back one last time at the ridge, at the sunset, at the mountains that had tested him and shaped him and ultimately set him free. "Thank you," he whispered, "to the mountains, to the ghosts, to the brothers who'd fallen and the brothers who'd survived. Thank you for the journey." Then he turned, walked into the light of the academy, into the warmth of family, into the future he'd fought so hard to secure. The door closed behind him. The last shepherd, finally home, finally at peace, finally free. END.